Welcome to the Village Council meeting, our regular meeting of March 25th, 2025. We will begin our council meeting as we usually do with an invocation tonight from Pastor Hugh Tudor Foley, and we'll follow by the Pledge of Allegiance by Charlotte Baxter of Pinehurst. Please, Pastor.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we ask that you bless our mayor and this council as they represent the people and community of Pinehurst. We thank you for their time and service. We ask that you grant that they may have a spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice as they consider the needs and concerns of our village. In your holy name, amen.
Thank you. Amen. Charlotte? There's the flag. Yeah. Go right ahead, Charlotte, whenever you're ready.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, and indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very much. Charlotte, we have a little something for you, a patch that our clerk has found for all our Pledge Allegiance to the leaders. Thank you. Okay. We'll now begin with reports, as we usually do. We'll start with the village manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some written remarks I would like to read. I want to take a moment to address the tragic incident that occurred in our community on March 15th. Any situation involving an officer-involved shooting is deeply concerning, and we recognize the profound impact this has had on everyone involved, most importantly, the family and loved ones affected. Our hearts go out to them during this incredibly difficult time. I also want to acknowledge and extend my gratitude to our police officers and first responders who face difficult and split-second decisions in their efforts to protect our community. Their dedication to public safety is not taken lightly, and we appreciate their service. Likewise, I want to thank our fire and law enforcement personnel who responded with professionalism and compassion. We understand that our community has questions, and we remain committed to transparency. The appropriate agencies are conducting a full and thorough investigation, and we will share updates as they become available. Thank you for your support as we navigate this difficult time. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for stating all that on behalf of the village, and we're all very proud of our police and fire departments on how they responded to that incident and the other, less of an incident, but the other episode where someone who's been living here for a while was located through DNA tracing. It turned out to be involved with a violent crime 40-something years ago in Maryland. So life goes on in our village. I had a few items. This past week, obviously, got to participate in the St. Patrick's Day Parade, and I want to thank all our residents and visitors who also lined the streets there. It was a fun time and a festive time for all, so thank you. And I want to thank the village staff for help coordinate all those various activities. We have some other things like that coming through the rest of the year, and you'll be notified as they're the rules of the road are established and finalized. Secondly, I attended with some of my colleagues our Neighborhood Advisory Committee meeting last week, and we had a good turnout. We discussed some more local issues that were important to the neighborhoods, and it continues to be a vehicle for feedback and communication between ourselves and the village government and our citizens. And I encourage residents who may want to just attend and listen to the NAC. It's open to the public, and they're welcome to attend at any time. Also, last week we held the Sandhills Metropolitan Planning Organization held its monthly meeting, and again, full attendance. There was some discussion by the NCDOT regarding the traffic circle. They indicated they may have another proposal sometime this summer to present to the residents and the public in general, and so we'll be watching that and looking forward to that. The other thing, we met with some representatives of Moore County, met with myself and the village manager as we discussed the possibility of a sort of land swap like we did last year regarding the water towers. And so it would be something else that would be beneficial to Pinehurst as well as beneficial to the county. And we'll provide more information as that gets closer to the end. And then today I attended the Tri-Cities meeting with the village manager, with the mayor of Aberdeen and the mayor of Southern Pines. We had a briefing from the North Carolina League of Municipalities, and they went over several bills that would have an impact on the village government here. One, of course, that passed last year that dealt with the issue of downzoning, of which there's been a lot of negative feedback from communities across the state, and we were told that that is in the process of being looked at as to how to sort of correct some of the errors that were in it. So we await and see what goes on there. And we also discussed the legislation that was introduced regarding ETJs, not only here in Moore County, which we faced last year, which the legislature ended up withdrawing, but ETJs all over the state. That's that extraterritorial jurisdiction, which helps us manage our growth around our borders, and of which the residents that live there enjoy it, and they enjoy the way we are managing that. As a matter of fact, later tonight on the agenda, we will have the announcement of appointment of someone from the ETJ to our NAC, so which is a first. So those are my comments. Let me turn it over to Dr. Morgan.
Just want to compliment the village staff, specifically with Doug, and the conduct and the tragedy last week. A lot of things happened behind the scenes, and it's not really evident to the public, but it's obviously transparent if you want to see the different things, but emails and things like that. But a lot happened, and our staff really responded. It's not just the police and the firefighters, and they did a great job, but the entire staff came together, and I think they did a bang-up job and very professional in handling that tragedy. So kudos to you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor.
First of all, I would echo Jeff's comments. You cannot today beat the speed of social media. And so people who might have lived adjacent to the property that was involved were out without necessarily a lot of information with comments almost immediately. I don't think we should try to beat that. We need to be accurate. We need to provide the truth when we know what it is. And I think that Doug, you and the staff did a good job keeping us up to date, because people began calling, at least me, saying what's going on. And secondly, not moving too quickly, so that when we knew what we could say, then we said it. I attended the SMPO meeting a week ago or last week. I think the important takeaway that I'd mentioned there, there have been a number of plans that the DOT had formulated and that were in the works prior to the formation of the SMPO. And a question came to me, well, what is the role of the SMPO as those projects go forward? And so they were able to, actually, a representative from NCDOT was able to provide a good answer to that. And the simple answer is not much for the things that are already in the STIP. Although they did reiterate a desire to be sure that in any of the projects they do, that they have local support. And that's something that's likely to come up again here fairly shortly. I also attended last week the presentation by the County Land Use Study Committee to the commissioners. And then, because there was no opportunity for public comment at that meeting, I went to the Moore County Commissioners meeting later and spoke briefly, emphasizing that I was there as a private citizen and not in any way representing the Village Council of Pinehurst. We're going to have a session in our work session later. I'll reserve most of my comments there. The one that I will mention and that I commented on there is a recommendation from the study committee for the establishment of an ongoing county commission to study growth at both the local and county level. There was no specificity on how they think that should be structured. I certainly think that's a good idea, and I would look forward to our participation in that. That's it for me.
Okay. Barbara Ficklin.
Thank you. I also would like to say thank you to our staff and to Village Police and Fire for their response in the situation that Doug talked about earlier. We are very fortunate to have a professional staff watching out for our safety 24/7 and in the face of danger. I also attended the St. Patrick's Day Parade, which was great fun. I got to wave to Pat from the sidelines, where I joined the staff handing out all kinds of wonderful Shamrock goodies, including necklaces and eyeglasses and all kinds of wonderful things. It was well attended, lots of fun, lots of kids, even though the weather wasn't great in the morning at least. My thanks to Parks and Rec for all they did to help put that together, and also to Pinehurst Business Partners, who also volunteered to help. And speaking of Pinehurst Business Partners, we had our meeting yesterday evening at the Purple Thistle in the village. It was delightful, always welcoming new members to a very interesting and fun group of people who really work on events throughout the year together. One last reminder about the Pinehurst Garden Club annual spring plant sale, which is on April the 27th, a Sunday, but you can pre-order now, March 16th through April 10th. Go to www.pinehurstgardenclub.org for more information. That's it for me.
Thank you, Barbara. Councilman Farrell.
Thank you, Mayor. I will second the comments about what a great job and a professional job the Public Safety Department and the village manager did in a very difficult situation last week. It was handled very professionally, I thought. A couple things. Also was at the NAC meeting where we discussed, or I should say, the village manager presented an outline of streetlights. And I think we're going to discuss that a little bit further, so we don't need to go into detail there. Was at the land use planning meeting from the county, along with Council Member Taylor, and we are going to also discuss that later. So no use in beating that one. To tell you the truth, it was at the. I caught the tail end of the St. Patrick's Day Parade. I was working the Welcome Center in the afternoon, and believe me, the celebration continued well into the afternoon. So I just thought I'd comment there. That's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
One more item that didn't come up. We are having our ribbon cutting ceremony for the Rassy Wicker Synthetic Turf Field tomorrow. So everyone is welcome, 4 p.m. You can come kick around a soccer ball with us.
That's the facility right behind the firehouse, right?
Yes.
Okay, yes, please, everyone join us. Okay, we'll go on to item 4, which is a motion to approve the consent agenda. All the items listed here are considered routine or have been discussed at length in previous meetings and will be enacted by one motion. No separate discussion will be held unless requested by a member of the village council. We'll be approving village council meeting minutes, the regular meeting minutes from March 11th, and the work session minutes from March 11th. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so adopted. That's the ends the consent agenda, and now we have a proclamation. Doug, do you have an intro for this, or?
I will just tee it up a little bit that in a community like ours that is named after a tree, Arbor Day is very important to us, and so I think we want to recognize it and recognize the value that taking care of our environment and our tree canopy and things like that is to our community. So we have prepared a proclamation for this. I'm happy to read it, or Mayor, you can do it as well.
I'll be delighted to read it. I thought it'd be good if there was a real explanation before I launched into this. This is a mayoral proclamation. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton, proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday called Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cutting heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, and whereas trees in our village increase property values and enhance the economic vitality of business areas and beautify our community. And whereas trees are a source of joy and spiritual renewal, and whereas Pinehurst strives to be recognized as a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation, now therefore I do hereby proclaim April 25th, 2025 as Arbor Day in the village of Pinehurst, and urge all citizens to support efforts to care for our trees and woodlands and to support our village's community forestry program. And further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to promote the well-being of present and future generations. So be it on this day in March. So congratulations, Village of Pinehurst. And one little note I want to mention, I once asked our resident tree expert on staff, Kevin Brewer, off the top of my head, I think I said this before, I said, Kevin, any ideas how many trees we have in the Village of Pinehurst? Not expecting an answer. About a half hour later, he comes back to me and he says, we have about 550,000 trees in the Village of Pinehurst. Now, whether that's accurate or not, I don't know, but I accept it as fact coming from Kevin Brewer. So that's quite a few trees we have here. Anyway, that takes care of that item. And now we will go forth to public comments. If anyone, we had a sign-up sheet. If anyone, nobody signed up, but if anyone should feel, even though they haven't signed up, that they would like to come forth with a public comment tonight about things on the agenda or anything else for that matter regarding our village, please come forward right now. No? Okay, well that takes care of item 6. Now we will go on to a public hearing. Public hearing for an official zoning map amendment regarding Trotter Drive. Let me read this, and then we'll take it up.
Do we need to go into a?
Is there a motion? Oh, is there a motion to go into the public hearing? I think you're right, Dr. Morgan.
So I move to recess the regular meeting and enter into the public hearing.
Okay. Second motion. All those in favor?
Aye. Okay.
So be it. Thank you. The purpose of the hearing is to consider an official zoning map amendment for approximately 8.04 acres of land, that's about 4 parcels, located in the vicinity of Trotter Drive west of North Carolina Highway 5, currently owned by Red Pine Investments, LLC, and further identified by parcel ID numbers 005-2965, 0005-2966, 0005-2967, and 0005-2968. This proposed map amendment would zone the property from Pinehurst South Form-Based District Block H to Pinehurst South Form-Based Conditional District Block H. The proposed rezoning and associated general concept plan would allow for the development of 48 single-family detached cottages. The applicant is Michael Latowski of Red Pine Investments, LLC. We'll now hear from a member of the head of the planning staff, Alex Cameron, and to make a presentation, much that you can see on the screens above us, so feel free to follow. Thank you, Alex.
No, I thank you for reading all that, so I don't have to kick this off. So again, the property or subject parcels in question are mostly vacant. However, there are currently 2 duplexes on the property on the western portion of Trotter Drive. The public hearing was duly posted, adjacent owners notified, and the hearing published. A little bit about conditional zoning requests and map amendments. These are legislative decisions and processes which require the public hearing, and we're in. with conditional zonings, an applicant or property owner may propose and the local government also consider site-specific development conditions related to that project. The caveat is that these conditions be mutually agreed upon. The public hearing does allow village council to consider, is actually a requirement that you consider adopted plans, especially the comprehensive plan, staff recommendation, and the input from the public from that public hearing in their deliberations. What we require as part of a conditional zoning map amendment request is, among other things, a general concept plan, or referred to as a GCP. The general concept plan is a general depiction. It is not a detailed engineered drawing of the development proposal. And if a conditional district rezoning is approved, that general concept plan becomes a site-specific development plan and a condition of that rezoning. So just for the edification of everyone in the room and those listening, this process, first application submitted, it is reviewed by the Technical Review Committee, who are made up from several disciplines, including engineering, utilities, fire, planning and zoning, and any other folks that are needed to be involved in that review. That's like an initial vetting process of the general concept plan and the development proposal. Once the staff technical review committee signs off, it is then forwarded to a public hearing and consideration of a recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Board to Village Council. And then where we are now in the teal-colored square in the process, we're in the council public hearing. After the council public hearing and decision, if the concept is approved, then an applicant may proceed with detailed construction drawing submittal for review and final approval of the staff technical review committee. If that proposal is denied, then an applicant with standing may appeal the decision to the Superior Court of Moore County. After all construction is authorized, commenced, completed, and inspected for compliance, then final platting for individual permits, or if it's for a non-residential development, those building permits may be reviewed and issued. So getting more into the detail of the request subject to the public hearing tonight, again, there are a total of 4 parcels totaling a little over 8 acres. The proposal does result in 48 single-family detached residential units or cottages that are all rear-loaded. Obviously, this, doing the math, it results in a density of just under 6 units per acre. And I did want to note, some of us are very familiar with the change in the zoning as a result of the Pinehurst South Small Area Plan and form-based guidance plans. The zoning of this property before that zoning change was residential multifamily, which also carries a maximum residential density of 6 units per acre. So this would have complied with the previous zoning. Access to each of these detached units, these rear-loaded units, is via a network of private alleys, and then which are proposed to be private, again, not dedicated as a public right-of-way, and then the public right-of-way of Trotter Drive that currently exists. The applicant has indicated on the general concept plan that it will be phased in 2 phases. Again, it's located just west of NC5 off Trotter Drive, and it is located within the village's corporate limits. Aside from a general concept plan, a project narrative, architectural character for elevations with material and color palette, assessment for impacts on the red cockaded woodpecker habitat, vehicle trip generation, needed fire flow, among other materials were submitted. So there's a little bit of a background on this proposal. This is the first time it's being considered by Village Council, but an application was made back in toward the end of 2023. And that proposal consisted of a mix of single-family detached cottages and townhome units, 31 and 34 respectively, with a density of a little over 8 units per acre. Planning and Zoning Board held a public hearing and considered the proposal and ultimately recommended Village Council deny the application, citing inconsistencies with recommendations of the form-based guidance plan and criteria in the Pinehurst Development Ordinance. After that, and as a result of the applicant wanting to seek opportunities to revise a request, Village Council later that, I believe it was February of 2024, referred the proposal back to the Planning and Zoning Board for consideration with the applicant on a more amenable plan. A little bit of background, situated with the area. Again, this area is in our corporate limits. It is flanked to the west by property that is in our ETJ. Thank you, Mayor, for the reference to that earlier in the meeting. And that area is zoned R5 and does consist of the Jackson Hamlet community. To the north, there's a residential multifamily development, the Bretton Woods Townhomes. To the north and east a little bit is the Trotter Hills Office Park, zoned office professional. And to the east and some of the Pinehurst South Forum-based district blocks H and G respectively, it contains the Abingdon Square townhomes. A little bit about the road network. Again, the main access being the 60-foot right-of-way of Trotter Drive, which is proposed to be redesigned a little bit to be consistent with the goals and recommendations in the Forum-based guidance plan to include additional landscaping and on-street parking. The private alleys consist of a 28 to 30-foot right-of-way, the larger right-of-way being for the area to the east, where on-street parking is provided, and a 20-foot paved surface as required for emergency access. Again, the roadway plan, which a snip is shown here on the screen, does detail how the private and public network and the pedestrian network is designed on the project. They are indicating that a total of 148 parking spaces are being provided. 96 of those is off-street, 2 per unit or garage, and then 52 on-street spaces. And then again, the sidewalks are depicted and shown in areas marked in green, which are along the Trotter Drive right-of-way on either side, as well as an internal network through the proposed open space and green space. Speaking of the open space and green space, the applicant is proposing and actually requesting a condition to provide 25%, which is above the 15% minimum required. The property is located within an environmentally sensitive area, the WS2 Drowning Creek Watershed Protection District. That watershed protection district does limit development to 1 dwelling unit per acre or 12% built upon area or BUA, unless a special intensity allocation or SIA is granted by Village Council with this conditional zoning approval. In that area, we have a little over 740 acres left to allocate. A special intensity allocation, if granted, would allow the total project area to have a maximum impervious surface or built upon area of 70%. The applicant, again, is seeking a condition to grant the special intensity allocation, which would also then, they would seek to allow for the individual lots to be permitted for up to 100% impervious surface coverage, keeping the maximum at 70% for the total project area for that total balance of 8 acres. A little history, the Pinehurst Development Ordinance currently does not have an avenue for approval of a single-family residential project. Historically, we have only granted those for non-residential or multifamily development. It is actually allowed, this is one of the delegated authorities by the state of North Carolina. The model ordinance allows for local jurisdictions, if they choose to issue special intensity allocations for single-family residential subdivisions. Based on my reading, it had been past policy of the Village Council as knowing there's a finite area of commercial development they wanted to preserve as much as they could, and a reallocation with the growing corporate limits back in about 2012, mostly due to the annexation of the Pine Wild subdivision. More land area was allocated to the village from the county, which is the reason why we have, or part of the reason why we have such a large bank, the 740 acres or so. Also, that the larger portion of our watershed protection district, the WS2, is the area that is zoned R210 and the southwest portion of our ETJ, which is obviously tagged for much more lower dense development and light agricultural uses. Stormwater management is proposed as a basin in the northwest portion of the property. Due to it being in a watershed protection district, BMPs or best management practices will need to be implemented to protect water quality. Water and sewer are to be served by Moore County Public Utilities, and the proposed layout is indicated on the utility plan of the general concept plan. The dimensional criteria in which the development is to follow is in Table 9.2 of the Pinehurst Development Ordinance, and there's additional criteria within the Pinehurst South Form-Based Guidance Plan. The table in front of you shows areas where the dimensional criteria is met, it is not met, and therefore a condition is requested, or where the applicant is proposing a condition to go above and beyond the standards and exceed those requirements. The ones to highlight are the ones for corner lot dimensional criteria, which I'll speak to much more detail in a later slide, that being the lot width as well as the build-to line, and the watershed impervious surface condition, which previously touched on. So here's again sort of the layout and the larger scale view. All this was forwarded in your packet. A little bit about the form-based guidance plan and why that's important and why that was utilized in designing the development proposal. The 2019 comprehensive plan recommended several areas as focus areas in which the village should explore reviewing and approving a small area plan for. As part of that, the form-based guidance plan came about as a companion document which would have much more detail on how to carry out the vision of future development in those areas. One of those goals was to explore a variety of different housing types, and the form-based guidance plan had recommendations for site, street, landscape, and architectural design, among others. So lot standards being one of the main criteria for development in the Pinehurst South area. The image on the left is directly out of the form-based guidance plan, which shows the minimum lot depth, widths, build-to lines, and setbacks. The lot typical image in the middle is what is included with the applicant's material on the general concept plan. As you can see, it is very consistent. One thing of note, and there will be more detail in a later slide, is the applicant is seeking a condition to allow for a porch encroachment, which was contemplated in the form-based guidance plan, but not codified with the amendments to the PDO. And again, these are all rear-loaded as recommended in the form-based guidance plan. Corner lots are described in the form-based guidance plan as lots that are situated in prominent locations and visibility within the community and have unique design criteria. So typically what this means is to have a little bit more stringent dimensional criteria as far as lot size, width, as well as build-to lines and lack of encroachments. The lot typicals there on the left, this time being those provided by the applicant, the image in the middle being lifted right out of the form-based guidance plan. Again, a lot of consistencies there. There's just a requested condition on 5 of those lots not meeting the corner lot standards. Which brings me to this slide. The 5 lots in question are lots 1, 26, 32, 33, and 48, the 5 shaded in blue in this image. Lot 1 being at the northwest corner, which is an area that is flanked to the east by proposed open space and a church parking lot on the adjacent property. Lots 26, 48, and 33, 25, 48, and 33, all abut a pedestrian passageway that connects the eastern portion open space across Trotter Drive to the western portion of the open space. And again, the applicant seeking a condition to apply the mid-block dimensional criteria in lieu of the corner lot dimensional criteria. So the porch encroachment, it's clear in the form-based guidance plan and the area highlighted there that it says front porches may extend into the front up to 2 feet from the lot line. So that's a pretty substantial encroachment. The applicant is seeking to go 50% into that build-to line, which is 15 feet, which would allow for a 7.5-foot porch encroachment on both the front and the right side. And again, the images in the form-based guidance plan clearly show, they're not dimensioned necessarily how far of an encroachment to allow, but the text on the left does seem to allow for a pretty substantial encroachment. These were never codified again in the amendments to the PDO, Table 9.2B. Alleys, there were some recommended alleyway design in the form-based guidance plan, which did require a 20-foot minimum required pavement width for emergency services or fire access, and that a 24-foot minimum right-of-way for alleyways be designed. The image to the right is what is proposed by the applicant. They both exceed or meet the requirements or the recommendations in the form-based guidance plan. The open space, the form-based guidance plan called for several different types of open space and landscape areas within residential or non-residential development. Two of those that are incorporated within the applicant's design are an attached green and pedestrian passages. The attached green are typically smaller than a central green, somewhere around 2 acres in size or less. And the concept with the form-based guidance plan was that a lot of these homes being rear-loaded would front, and instead of on an improved road or street, on that attached green or that green space. So as you can see here with the area shaded in green, obviously all the homes are either fronting on that green space or along Trotter Drive and rear-loaded. And one of the other recommendations for design in the form-based guidance plan were architectural design. There are different allowances for single-family residential or residential development for what local jurisdictions can consider for architectural design. However, there are recommendations for materials, colors, roofs, building configuration, and elements. The applicant is not seeking a condition for this and has provided, again, these front character elevations as well as a proposed material and color palette. Color palette to meet our currently adopted current palette, and the materials that they are proposing, mainly a fiber cement exterior clad, is consistent with those recommendations in the form-based guidance plan. So the applicant is seeking specifically these 7 conditions, and again, through a conditional district approval and per the Pinehurst Development Ordinance, there are opportunities for them to seek these, whether they are to impose greater restrictions on their plan or to seek deviations. Planning and Zoning Board action. Again, they held a public hearing in November of '23, recommended denial due to inconsistencies. After revising a plan and going back before the Planning and Zoning Board earlier this month, the Planning and Zoning Board unanimously recommended approval of the proposal with the requested conditions submitted by the applicant and staff. Village Council action. After conducting the public hearing and receiving the public comment and reviewing the material along with the staff and Planning and Zoning Board's recommendation, and then after closing the hearing, you will have the opportunity to speak with the applicant and consider revisions to the plan to address concerns, consider any additional or amended conditions. However, again, they must be mutually agreed upon. After conducting the hearing and closing it, then you may have the opportunity to take one of the following actions, which would be to approve. Any approval must be by adopting an ordinance, which is the next agenda item, 8A. And you are to make a statement of consistency with adopted plans and reasonableness in making that decision. You have the ability to deny, which can be made by simple motion, and adopt a statement of consistency with adopted plans. And you may also choose to defer the action to a later regular scheduled meeting date. Plan consistency, again, is a statutory requirement that governing boards, when considering these proposals, make some sort of general statement and consider consistency with your adopted plans. Provided a table of a couple of goals and visions within the adopted plans of why this proposal is consistent. Again, some of these are pretty specific, like a dimensional standard, and some of them are a little bit more aspirational. So the staff recommendation, staff does recommend further discussion and consideration on the requested conditions as it relates to the corner lot dimensional standards and the porch encroachments. We believe that they should be considered due to the recommendations in the form-based guidance plan. And if council is amenable to these conditions, staff recommends approval of the conditional zoning request. With one caveat, we would like to add one additional condition for council and the applicant to consider, and that is to not apply the buffer yard landscaping standards in section 9.14.6. And I'm happy to go in great detail on why we recommend that not apply. But at 30,000-foot level, this was a initiative by the village that we undertook beginning in 2021, and it was never intended to apply to a development such as this, where the lots are much smaller and a more dense residential development. It was more to provide a buffer with larger residential lots and to protect the tree canopy a little bit more, or to reinstate tree canopy, as mentioned. These developments are not typically impose individual lot landscaping standards, but handled throughout the entirety of development through street trees and other landscape or buffer areas. So that will conclude the staff portion of the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions on the staff submitted material before moving forward to the applicant.
I'll ask my colleagues to begin. Go ahead.
One administrative question before we go down here. We received a letter that was disseminated. Should that be considered to effectively have been read into the public comment section? Or how do we regard the allegations made in that letter?
Yeah, so I think we're going to bring that up when we open it up more for the public comment. I mean, right now it is public comment, but after staff and the applicant have had a chance to talk, I think it'd be appropriate to address that letter.
I agree. Okay. Other questions or comments to Alex? None? Barb?
A couple, Alex, and some of these come out of the letter. You haven't mentioned anything about stormwater retention other than there is a pond there.
Sure.
That was, I assume there was review by the technical review committee of those plans, and can you enlighten us as to what the findings were?
Sure. So there's a very important part of the application material named General Concept Plan. So General Concept Plans have a submittal checklist in Appendix C of the PDO. And part of that is a requirement to show the general depiction and type of stormwater management for a proposal. So again, I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation that a general concept plan is not a fully detailed or engineered drawing. It is just meant to have the applicant to have an idea to look at where might be the most appropriate and type of stormwater management device. So they have met that minimum requirement, but is not a requirement to have a full detailed engineered analysis.
There's a reference here when you talked about materials to the color palette. Is that the same that would be used by historic preservation?
It is the same.
And tree canopy, I did a site visit. It's completely wooded now. What percentage of the canopy is likely to be preserved, assuming this is approved as planned?
I have no way of knowing, but I would imagine that there would obviously need to be a substantial amount felled in order to have the infrastructure installed in the individual
And
lots.
that's not a consideration in either the form-based guidance or the small area plan?
There's no detailed criteria for preservation of a tree canopy.
That's good for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Maureen?
Just one question. When we're talking about having 100% impervious per lot, but still falling below our requirements there in the overall project, is there a concern on that? How does that affect us? I'm not an engineer on this, but I can certainly understand that at a certain point in time, that would cause an issue with stormwater issues or other things like that.
So the intent would be if the special intensity allocation is granted, there's still that threshold of 70% that cannot be crossed for the totality of development. And that would leave or allow for a balance of up to 100% on the individual lots. So if a proposal like this were to be approved, then when you get to the detailed engineering drawings, they would be able to quantify what that amount of runoff would be, and then make sure that their detention area or their stormwater basin would be able to meet our development standard for post-development runoff. So it would just become a calculation that at max 70% that the stormwater basin could detain and release at the same rate that we would require. From an administration standpoint, easy is not always the best answer, but that would be one less development restriction for us to track on the individual lots, whereas typically we have a max per development as well as a max per lot. So if the stormwater management system is designed to handle that 100% max, limited that 70% total, it's pretty easy.
Thank you.
But these are not zero line.
There will still be some green space, just by virtue of the dimensional
There
criteria on the
are
lots.
setbacks that apply to every single building on every single lot.
And they are much smaller lots than we're typically accustomed to, or that our table of dimensional standards typically apply.
John?
Alex, I think you said that the PDO or the form-based kind did not contemplate issuing an SIA for single-family residential, but we are within our authority to do so if it was intended for commercial and multifamily, but we can apply it here if we choose.
Correct, that's in the PDO, so an applicant can seek a condition through conditional zoning to allow for that.
Yeah, the PDO intention, I think, was for commercial and/or multifamily, but this comes as close to that as we can possibly get, the way I see it.
And it was likely another one of those unintended items that were a result of us approving these plans and having these visions for more dense development in that area that never carried over to an amended PDO.
And if I've interpreted your comments right, we may or may not we will make a decision on a zoning request. But there could be, as you get to more detailed engineering drawings, other issues that could arise that could, this is not a green light to go ahead and stick a shovel in the ground. I guess
There will be no development approved if this conditional request is approved tonight. So correct, yes.
No, but if it is approved, there are still other steps with respect to formal engineering plans for stormwater and so forth.
Yes.
Other hurdles that have to be met.
Absolutely,
But they will not have to come before the council.
correct.
Right.
Okay.
Unless there's substantive changes,
Right.
which we don't expect at this time.
Two small items. The sidewalks, how far up Trotter Drive there do they go? It looked like I was following the green line. It doesn't go to the corner of Highway 5. It sort of stops.
It does not go all the way to Highway 5. It would cover their boundary of their property. You see it right there. The blue area is like the outline of the total subject property
Yes.
boundary. The green goes up to that area right there. So where the church property and this property corners are.
So that's where it stops at the church, okay. Second question on the staff recommendation, your final item, the condition. Help me understand once again what we're deviating from.
Okay. So that requirement is that a certain number of specified tree species have to be planted within what is deemed to be a buffer yard. Buffer yards are typically those areas outside of the building envelope, so within the outside of the setback area.
Okay, outside.
Because these are so small lots, and because we're considering the potential of an encroachment into that build-to line, and that those setbacks are not as stringent as others, there's not enough space. There will not be enough space to, we will enact a requirement that would not be able to be met.
That's in front of each house, am I right?
Front, sides, and rear.
And what about the envelope of the property?
So since this is a single-family residential development, no planted buffer around the perimeter is required.
Okay.
However, a lot of that area is proposed to be left as open space, and aside from areas where infrastructure needs to be installed, water or sewer or otherwise, there would be the potential to retain or preserve as much existing vegetation as there. Not a requirement, but there would be an opportunity.
And there could be plantings made also.
In areas where it could be suitable if the applicant was amenable to it.
Okay. Yeah, we can revisit that later, but I'm set there. Anything else?
And just one more on the encroachment issue. The form-based guidance would allow them to build a porch to within 2 feet of the property. They're proposing not to go to 2 feet, but to be 7.5 feet away.
Correct.
So within the 2-foot guideline then?
Yep.
Substantially, okay, thank you.
Okay. I hear no other questions for Alex. Do we now want to invite the applicants up? All right there. Okay, come forward, and please do introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Katowski, and I represent Red Pine Investment Company and the project located on Trotter Drive. I would like to thank all the members of the village planning staff, planning and zoning board members, village council, Kuntz Jones Design, LKC Engineering, and the team at Red Pine Investments for the collaborative effort it took to be here before you tonight. Our team is here today with the first project under the new Pinehurst South Small Area Plan. This plan has been in the works for over 2 years. As most of you know, we presented our original design in November of 2023 to the Planning and Zoning Board. At that meeting, we had a lengthy conversation of what the vision of the newly adopted Small Area Plan and form-based guidelines should look like for this project. Since then, we have spent many hours reading through the guidelines, sketching plan after plan, and plan after plan, asking a lot of questions and doing a lot of listening. For over a year, we have become much more familiar with the underlying documents in the Small Area Plan. We have had many productive meetings with the planning staff, the planning board, the village council members, and we have researched and visited other successful local housing projects. We have refined our initial plan numerous times and incorporated the feedback from this council, the planning board, planning staff, village engineering, the fire marshal, and public utilities. We were endorsed in unanimous decision by the planning board a few short weeks ago, and we are here tonight to present to you a site plan that conforms with this feedback and meets the regulations of these underlying planning documents that the village took so much pride and care in creating. As you have seen and heard in the staff report and presentation, we have thoroughly addressed the previous items of concern, and we believe we are presenting you with the vision we all seek for Pinehurst South. I would like to introduce you to our team: Rick Rosenbaum, Senior Project Manager for Red Pine Investments, Bob Kuntz, Kuntz Jones Design, Jackson Maples, LKC Engineering. They will give a short presentation and be available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Good to be here tonight. I'm Bob Kuntz with Kuntz Jones Design. We are at 140 Applecross Road in Pinehurst. And I'd like to walk through the project. Alex did a really good job of walking through the details, and I'd like to go through it in a little bit more of a design perspective and talk through it, and then add a little bit of information based on the conditions that we're requesting with the corner lots and the setbacks. So I'll go ahead and get started. As looking at the site location, you can see here Highway 5 is on the eastern side of the image. The Exxon gas station is on the corner. The Sandhills Alliance Church next to it, and then the property down Trotter Drive, and then as Trotter Drive turns and heads to the south and goes into the Abingdon multifamily development. There is, as we were just looking at the aerial photograph, Mayor, to your question earlier about sidewalk, there is a sidewalk that is in front of the Sandhills Alliance Church. So it would connect to that sidewalk. So that would occur there.
Thank you.
So that's the overall look of the site and where it's located. These are some existing site photos looking down Trotter Drive. You can see on the lower left-hand image, you can see the business park, the Trotter Hill Business Park, some of the buildings there. The photo above that are the existing duplexes, which will be removed, assuming this project moves forward. And then the lower right-hand side is the Abingdon multifamily buildings, two-story building. And then the top image is looking back at around the curve, looking back toward the Trotter Hill Business Park, back toward Highway 5.
Bob, if you go back one photo, that one at the bottom right-hand corner, on the left is Abington. Is that what you said?
Actually, that is looking back. So that's standing in the Abington apartments. and looking, yes, and then looking back, so if you're looking at this image, that building that you see is the building on the lower left-hand side, that building right there.
And what I'm trying to figure out is what's across the street there where right now there's garbage pails, but what's
Yeah.
back there?
Those are the Abingdon apartments. So
those are still the Abingdon
Those are still the
apartments.
Abingdon apartments, that's right. Those are on the Abingdon property, and looking back down the public street there. To the north is Bretton Woods, and you see the fence at Bretton Woods, and looking back at the garages there. The images on the right are both the property boundary for Abingdon, the Abingdon Apartments, and then the lower left-hand image is from the Sand Hills Alliance Church. The property boundary is roughly where you see the power pole there. So that's roughly where the property boundary is. Looking at the general concept plan, coming in the road coming in from the north is Trotter Drive, and then it turns and heads to the south. As Alex mentioned, that drive would be improved. We would use the existing right-of-way, but improve that to meet the guidelines in the form-based guide. It would have on-street parking, sidewalks, street trees, and become a complete street, which was recommended in the form-based design guidelines as well. The units that are on the left-hand side or the western side of Trotter Drive all would front Trotter Drive. The units furthest to in the northeast, those would front Trotter Drive as well, with some large open space in front. And then coming down Trotter Drive, turning into the alley on the eastern side of the site, would be a loop alley. This loop alley would allow for the garages to be accessed, all of the parking behind, allowing for front porches to be located on the greens and located on these green spaces. The large green space in the middle, which we're looking at as a passive recreation space with benches and more of a garden environment there. On the western portion of the property, having a loop alley that comes down, allowing those garages to be accessed from the rear, so the front porches can front Trotter Drive. On the western side of that alley, those units, again, they would also be alley loaded, but those units would have porches that front onto the large green area and stormwater area, which would be turned into a recreation area for the community. The area further to the south, you can see the pedestrian passageway, and Alex mentioned the pedestrian passageway earlier. We are looking at making a connection, a strong green connection through the development that would connect the green spaces together. So connecting all the way from the larger park area and open space on the right-hand side, on the eastern side of the property, and then connecting over to the larger green space back with the community area, community gathering area on the western side of the property. That cut through and that passageway allows for people to walk throughout the neighborhood and to connect all the green spaces together. There's also, with the kiosk, the mail kiosk centrally located in the park space, it really allows for someone living in one of the units to the northeast or northwestern side of the property can have a nice walk to the mail kiosk at night or walk your dog or whatever you're doing. One of the things that's important about these types of neighborhoods that are envisioned in the form-based guideline is that the community really builds community. By putting the front porches on the fronts of the building, having sidewalks, all that helps build community. As people are walking their dogs or walking at night to the mail kiosk, your neighbors are sitting on the front porch, you can have a conversation, and these types of neighborhoods really build community. I think there are some examples, and the village, the historic village, is also an example of that with front porches and things where people talk, and it just really builds community. So looking at a little more detail of that connected open space, everything, looking at sitting areas, fire pits, those kinds of things in those areas in the large park, with a mail kiosk, and then having that pedestrian passageway, we think it really makes a big impact on the development. Rather than having to walk from the green space, walk down Trotter Drive, then sort of weave your way around, we like this direct connection, this direct green space moving through the community. So this is an image of the Trotter Drive. And this is a look at that pedestrian passageway and what we're envisioning for that pedestrian passageway. You can see in this image we're showing a shade structure at the beginning of that passageway off of Schroeder Drive, which somewhat reflects the mail kiosk on the other side, and really creating that as a garden space and a place that you would really want to walk that connects all the spaces together. We're showing a bench right now and think that could ultimately be just a nice walk and a nice place to cut through the community. This is an image of the large green with sitting spaces, fire pits. You can see the front porches there, fronting that green space. So if someone's out in the green and someone's sitting on their porch, they can talk. If they have children, their children can play in the park while they're sitting on their front porch watching the children play. Just a really nice environment for building community. This is a look back at the mail kiosk area. Again, looking at the front porches, seeing the street. You see the pedestrian passageway across the street there with the shade structure leading back to the other parts and connecting those larger green spaces throughout. This is an image of the area in the back of the property. Again, these units all front out onto I'll back up here for a second. So this is the area that's shown as the park and community gathering area. And I think this image is roughly, if you were sitting just outside of the park and gathering area. Oops. So you would be looking out. Those units would have their front porches looking out on the sidewalks and looking out over that green space and creating a nice environment for the residents. The units, as Alex mentioned, we're looking at hardy plank material or cementitious fiber material, asphalt shingles, front porches, and we would have volunteered to follow the Pinehurst, Village of Pinehurst color palette for the historic district. There's a wide variety of colors there, so it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of opportunity to create some pretty unique combinations. Now I'd like to to walk through the requested conditions. As Alex mentioned, a lot of them, they deal with the build-to line and the build-to encroachments. In particular, something as Alex mentioned doesn't seem to be codified in the PDO. That was definitely part of the form-based guidelines. And then also the designation of corner lots. What constitutes a corner lot, and where are those located, and why we're asking for those modifications. In addition, the maximum impervious surface that we talked about, and Alex mentioned in the special intensity allocation, as we were going through, we typically, if this were a commercial project, the site would be viewed as one whole. So if there were a large building and a parking lot, it would be viewed as a whole site, and you would be able to go up to 70% impervious. Since it's a residential project, sometimes it isn't calculated that way. But I feel like it should be calculated that way, looking at the entirety of the impervious surface for the project, because you are allowed up to 70%. The way the ordinance is written, there's a maximum lot impervious surface for an individual lot, and it breaks it down a little bit into minutia, and it makes it a little bit, and I'll ask Alex, but it becomes an administrative issue. As we were doing our calculations, we did our calculations, and with the additional open space that we're providing, and with the amount of impervious surface that's on the site, we end up with a number that's slightly below 70%, even if every lot were 100% covered. So from an administrative standpoint, I think it would make Alex's life a lot easier if every time someone comes in, and it really, for the first part, it's easy, but when someone comes back in later on, let's say the house is built 3 years down the road, someone wants to build a porch or wants to build a little patio in the backyard. Well, they have to go through the administrative process of reviewing those things, et cetera. Whereas if someone wants to build a porch and we have the 100% or a little patio, they can just go through the process and make it happen. We know it's not going to be 100% impervious surface on each lot because of the setbacks and the areas around the house. We know that it's not going to be, but from an administrative standpoint, I think it just makes it a lot easier for the staff. And we know we're committing to staying under 70% as a whole for the impervious surface. So it really views the project as one large project rather than a series of 48 small projects.
Help me understand how you increase the minimum amount of open space from 15 to 25%. How did that math come about?
The open space that is required by the PDO is, in this district, is 15%. So based on as we went back through the plan and went through the density, we ended up getting to a point with the large amount of area needed for stormwater management, the large parks that we created, and the large recreation areas that are part of this, and the passageways. We ended up with the ability to increase the amount of open space throughout. So as part of this, we don't necessarily have to commit to that, but as a condition, we are committing to doing 25% rather than 15%. So as Alex is reviewing site plans, we have to maintain that 25%. We can't say, okay, later on, oh, we just want to be at 15%. We're showing you a plan that we're committing to.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So Alex did a really good job of describing the build-to line encroachment. And we actually have the same images that Alex has, but we did pull a couple of the images directly from the small area or the form-based guidelines of some of the examples in the build-to line encroachment. So you can see how the wraparound porch on the lower image wraps around and encroaches into that setback. And then the porches on the image at the top, they also encroach into that setback line. So we're asking to basically recognize what was in the form-based guidelines. So I think it's really important that those front porches are there and close to the street for that walking. And then the side lot encroachment, these are two of the images, again, from the guidelines. And you can see the wraparound porch. And I think wraparound porches, in particular, if we're looking at some of the lots here, like the lot, let's say the lot as you're turning down Trotter Drive, the two lots at the northern end of Trotter Drive. Having wraparound porches there as you're driving into the community and you're coming around and about to drive down the public street there, we think would just be a really great look. And it mentions in the guidelines that it should be utilized for high-impact areas. So we think that those wraparound porches add to the overall development and the character of the development. And we'd like to be able to use those and utilize those to recognize the pictures that were part of the form-based guidelines, something along that line. And it's interesting seeing these photographs because these images are always taken from when it was initially planted. Because if you envision that tree 10 years from now and see those two trees that are there, those trees are above the property or above the roof line of that building, and it really has a unique character and really starts to create a really great environment. But having those porches on the corners, I think, is a really important piece. So going through the individual lots, we designated with the staff the corner lots, all the lots hatched in blue, and then the lots with the green dots were all considered corner lots. The lots with the green dots were meeting and complying with all aspects of the PDO. Lot 1, which you see in the northeastern portion of the property, and then lot 32, we can accommodate the 15 feet and the side setback on those lots. The question that we have is we'd like to plant some screening and some buffering adjacent to those, and rather than having that screening and buffering as part of the individual lot owner's process, we'd like to have it as part of the POA so they can maintain those, especially on lot 1 where we definitely want to have some screening there. There's a church parking lot that's directly adjacent to that area. So having some large plantings and large screening there is going to be really important. Lot 32 is adjacent to adjacent properties that aren't part of the form-based guidelines. So we don't know what's going to happen there long-term. So having the ability to have those screening plants and be part of the POA rather than being part of an individual homeowner's lots, we think is important.
And this will all be HOA maintained common area?
Correct.
Okay.
And then lots 25, 48, and 33, going back to the pedestrian passageway portion, if we were to accommodate those lots as, we can probably accommodate it, but we think that that pedestrian passageway is really important. And we think that with the form-based guidelines, there was this image about what those pedestrian passageways are to look like. And in this case, it had 18 feet from building face to building face. In our situation, we have 20 feet from property boundary to property boundary, and then a side setback of 6 feet. So it's really 32 feet from building to building. So we feel like it makes it a nice piece and a nice part of the development to have this pedestrian passageway and to have it landscaped rather than having to have a side porch there. I think it's not necessarily the right location for a side porch. And then you can see the lower image is taken from the form-based guidelines, and it's kind of tight. It's a really unique space, and it's a nice place to walk. And it connects green areas of the development. And the image to the top is the image that we're proposing as part of that pedestrian passageway. Just a quick look at traffic generation. The top line is the new plan, and the bottom line was the previous plan. The previous plan had 65 dwelling units and a total of 654 daily trips. And what that means, essentially, is that's 654 trips throughout the day. And it's 654 trips, and that's not just for each residence, but it includes mail, post office, UPS, FedEx, landscapers, buses. It takes into account everything that may or may not come into that development. A lot of times it's not on a daily basis. A lot of times it's broken out throughout the week. And then they base traffic on peak hours, AM and PM peak hours. So you can see there that the old plan had 60 AM peak hours. So that's one car every minute. So that's not a lot of traffic, if you think about how long a minute is. I mean, if you actually sit and think about how long a minute is, it actually feels a lot longer if you're actually timing it. And then the single-family detached, the new plan actually reduced that by 140 trips per day, reduced the AM peak by 22 trips, and the PM peak by 20 trips. So you're talking about, in the AM, about one car every 2 minutes. Plus or minus. So it's really not adding a lot of traffic. In addition, this plan, with improvements going on in Highway 5 to accommodate more traffic, and then the fact that this is right at a traffic light, we don't see that there's any issue with traffic, and NCDOT has agreed that there's not an issue with traffic here. Overall project information, the property was permitted in the PDO. For 10 dwelling units or of townhomes at 10 units an acre. And that would be 80 units, single-family detached at 7 dwelling units an acre for 56 units. And we're actually proposing 6 dwelling units per acre on the overall development. And we feel like with that, we've taken that extra density and exchanged it for open space. So we feel like we've added a lot of open space because of that lower density. The stormwater controls are going to be per state regulations, and Jackson Maples is here from LKC Engineering and can answer any stormwater management questions that you guys have. And then there was a red-cockaded woodpecker report, an endangered species report prepared for the property, and there was no activity found. So just brought up the requested conditions slide again at the end. Just if anybody had any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Mr. Mayor, I have one quick question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Bob, the alleyways, I'm assuming they're going to be HOA maintained indefinitely?
That's correct. They're private alleys. Mm-hmm.
Doctor? John?
Are the alleys built to the standards, roadway standards that we would insist on if they were our streets?
So the applicant has proposed that they will meet basically our street construction standards. We don't really have any standards for alleyways in our engineering standards manual, but they have proposed, correct me if I'm wrong, that you will meet our street design standards for the thickness of the alleyway.
That's correct. And the fire marshal's requiring that because the fire truck has to get there, so it has to accommodate a fire truck.
Okay. Jack, do you have any more?
I mean, no, I understand all the issues. I think it's interesting that they are committing to a larger open space than required. And I think you probably didn't emphasize enough that you are committed to that, and they cannot back down from that. So as they build, it must be 25% open space, which is quite a commitment, I believe. The other thing, just to point out that, and Alex mentioned this a couple times, that things didn't get codified. I think that between the staff, the planning and zoning board, and the council probably reviewed hundreds of criteria, dimensions, uses, and so forth in creating the form-based codes and so forth. And so it's not unexpected that something may not have made it, quite honestly, into the code exactly as intended. So that I don't think that was an intentional oversight. That was just something that happened. The other thing I will say that I think the design with the front porches facing the street, and particularly those that face the open space, I think it will create the potential for a real community, a real neighborhood, and I think that's very exciting. I think that's very positive. The special intensity allocation, as I mentioned, I think that we have the ability to allocate it to this type of environment, although the PDO may have stated commercial and or multifamily. I think this, like I said, comes as close to multifamily as we're probably going to get. The other items on the buffer requirement, I mean, I can't imagine how you would actually implement the buffer requirements on these lots with the density we're going to have and the size of the units. The other thing, I think this is correct, and maybe you can help me out here, is if you look at the plans, you'll see some units have integrated two-car garages, some have detached two-car garages. I don't think we're holding them to this exact configuration on every single lot. I believe that they can develop either integrated garages and or detached garages, depending upon how the market looks and what makes sense for that particular lot. Is that correct? We're not really asking them to make sure that every single one of these is going to be exactly as we see here. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's no requested condition for that. I think this is just a visual to show how the mix of integrated and detached garages could work. They are proposing to meet the dimensional standards for both, whether it be attached or detached.
Right. Okay.
There are two different standards for that in the
there are.
PDO. So,
But you will meet those standards, whichever way you choose to go on a particular lot. Is that
that's
correct?
correct. That's correct.
Jack, would you consider it likely that the reason that SIAs were not contemplated for single-family residential is that they did not contemplate a density for single-family residential like this? So it wasn't a desire to avoid it, it just was thought to be unlikely.
I think that's a fair assumption. I don't know whether I couldn't accurately say whether or not that was exactly what someone was thinking, but as I said, this is as close to multifamily as we're going to get relative to density and so forth, to tell you the truth.
Barb, do you have anything else?
I would just like to say thank you for your persistence and your willingness to take the time and thoughtfulness to put together a plan that matches our small area plans. I think the idea that these units open onto greenery rather than a street is wonderful. I like the alleyways as the sole access, so I think it looks like a very interesting arrangement.
Doug, John, did you have something else you want to comment on?
One question for Alex as we head in the direction possibly of a motion. I believe you said there were 7 conditions that had in essence been approved by planning and zoning. Are those considered additional conditions from the standpoint of a resolution here? Or do we need to list those? Because I don't think any of us have a copy of those here.
So they were included in the staff report and in the next agenda item. Again, jumping ahead a little bit, I know we're not finished with this agenda item. It is prescribed in that ordinance if council were to consider a motion to approve or adopt that ordinance. Because officially on the record, both the applicant and the village would have to agree to those. So they are listed out, and with the staff recommended added condition, there's a total of 8.
Are they considered part of the application so we do not have to approve with conditions? The conditions are already part of the application.
They've already been considered and noted, yes.
Thank you.
I think the ordinance will say as submitted. And if there's
The
any
ordinance does
deviations
include
from
the
that
conditions.
necessary, then you would have to specify those.
And the ordinance does have those conditions in there, but yes, you're correct. If anything is going to be considered to be amended, then it would have to be specific in that motion what those amendments are.
Thank you.
Doug, did you have a letter that was referenced earlier that you wanted to read into the record at this point?
Yeah, I don't believe we should read the entire letter into the
Summarize
record.
it, yeah.
And this letter came from the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, and Alex, you're welcome to chime in anytime you want. You've had more conversation with them. But we received it today, and there's quite a few concerns in that letter. I think actually most of them have been addressed either through the staff planning process or with the planning and zoning. But maybe 2 of the major points they brought up were the special intensity allocation, and I believe that's been addressed. They are going to be under that 70% allocation, and we have the available acreage to meet that special intensity allocation. And the other major one was traffic. I think Bob did pull up the slide. This area will generate additional traffic, but as you mentioned, it is at a traffic light on the Highway 5, Beulah Hill Road, so that additional traffic doesn't seem like it's going to be a major concern. With that, Alex, I'll let you add anything you may want to.
I'm not real sure I could have done any better, so I think that was a great job. No, just in my correspondence throughout the day today with my contact, in addition to the letter that was distributed to Village Council, the 2 main topics of concern they iterated was the special intensity allocation and the traffic. Of course, we haven't gone to the public comment portion of the hearing yet, so there may be additional comments on some of these topics, and folks whom they were representing would like to speak in greater detail are certainly more welcome to do that.
The other thing I believe that was mentioned in that letter was relative to the stormwater management. And it is true that you don't see the total engineering design in the site plan. What you see is a site plan that shows whether or not, and I think that TRC has reviewed the site plan to the extent that they think that what they see today is likely to be more than satisfactory to handle the stormwater management. Is that a fair representation? Now, the engineering work to be done at the detail level with the construction drawings is a whole different process.
Yeah, that's correct. And again, we do have a development standard that we will fall back on if and when the proposal got to that stage. And to comment a little bit on what we have seen with other development applications in the very nearby area, adjacent property area, that the infiltration rates with the types of soils here are literally off the charts. There is a high deal of infiltration. Granted, that does change, that does alter, and there will be supplemental detailed reports that will have to accompany the stormwater calculations to make sure and back up what they submit that meets our standard.
And is it true that the site topography is such that it actually all sort of moves to that direction,
I think that would,
lending itself to a reasonably easily maintained stormwater
I think that's why it's
management?
there.
Yeah, the high point on the property is really on the southeastern side, and everything flows to the northwest, the top of the property.
It was pretty obvious where there ought to be, yeah.
It was a pretty easy one, yeah, for sure.
And Alex, as you mentioned additional work that is done with full engineering reports. That encompasses the point that was made in the letter in terms of 10-year or 100-year storms and so forth. That is all part of that process.
Yeah, so our standard is that post-development runoff will not exceed pre-development runoff for a 10-year, 24-hour storm event. So they would have to submit information to us that would meet that requirement.
And I understood in essence, the calculation on impervious surface, looking at it less on a lot-by-lot basis and more on a development basis. But it would be our suspicion, at least at this point, that that would not prove problematic.
Now, again, I kind of made the comment that, you know, easier is not always better, but for a calculation and to administer the requirement of the condition would be pretty easy. We have run into issues where there have been other sort of a different approval process, or where impervious surface through development plans haven't been codified through a condition, where it's kind of left things up in the air about which standard to fall back on. So the fact that anything is explicit in a condition or with the general concept plan helps staff to administer that requirement long term.
Good, thank you.
Doug, the summarization of that letter that was submitted was fine. Do we want to hear right now from others, or do we want to and leave this open for the moment, or do we want to close this?
Yeah, so we should leave the public hearing open and allow for public comment.
Okay, well, then we'll do such. You all can just remain right there for the moment, if that's okay. And we do have some people who want to speak. Call them up in the list they signed up for. Martha Gentry, please come on up, introduce yourself, and go right ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Martha Gentry.
Pull the mic a little closer to you. Thanks.
I'm not as tall as Mike is. Martha Gentry. My husband Peyton and I own the RE/MAX franchise in Pinehurst and have for the last 30 years. Our team's had an opportunity to review the same things that you folks are looking at now. And my purpose of being here is to support this and let you know that it's something that we think it is really needed in the community. I've got a chart. We're kind of famous for those. I've got a chart, and if it's appropriate, I'd like to share it with you. Could I?
Surely.
Okay.
Martha, do you mind sharing one with the village clerk? Can you share one with the village clerk?
Shannon at the corner there. Give me two. Give me two. Right ahead.
Our MLS as of today, and the heading is what we're looking at, single-family homes from April 1st of last year to today, so almost a complete year. And this gives you the number of homes in Pinehurst and what price range they are in. And if you will see over here, in the last year, we've had 399 homes sold, it's Pinehurst only, 89 currently for sale, this is our whole MLS, 79 pending, and that gives us a 2.68 supply of homes in Pinehurst as of today. A normal market is 5 to 6 months. So it is really obvious that what we've got right now, due to interest rates, due to late rate lock for a lot of people staying in their homes and not moving, you know, we just don't have enough homes. And if the new construction can't help and fill up, I don't see anything that's going to change in the rates and probably, you know, help us enough to have more homes as we normally do coming on the market. So we have very few homes on the market. That is keeping our prices high. So now buyers are faced with not only high prices because of supply and demand, but a much higher interest rate than most of them are used to paying. This project, Mike said it would be high 4s, low 5s. If you look at the price rates here, you see that is a long, the biggest numbers are the ones that are in that price range. In other words, from 400 to 650 is the majority of the homes that are sold in Pinehurst. So I think this is a beautiful project. I think they put a lot of effort and work in it. And, you know, I think the community needs it.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing this. Appreciate it. Well, now move on to, I think it's Thomas Tyson. Did I pronounce that right? Please come forward.
Mr. Mayor and the council members, thank you for offering us the opportunity. My name is Thomas Tyson. I currently reside at 1584 NC Highway 5. And I'm also the president of the Jackson Hamlet Community Action Program. As you can see, the letter from the Southern Coalition team addresses several issues. I'm not going to go down because it's all too many to address personally. But those letters has been a collaboration of all the citizens in the community addressing issues that we thought should be presented before this board. Now, we are vehemently opposed to the development of this project, and the reasons are stated in that letter. Initially, the introduction to the letter basically covers the items that we feel are very important. In conclusion with that letter, it also addresses why we wrote the letter and wanted you to take these items into consideration. What we're really afraid of is about what it's going to do to the roads. We have 3 major roads in Jackson Hamlet. We have Gaines Street, which sits right next to the project. We have Cotton Street, which is the middle road, and then we have Dawkins Street. These are the 3 major highways that we have in that community. It provides access to Highway 5, entrance and exit. Traffic, as you can see, is already a problem. It takes anywhere from 10 to 12 minutes to get on Highway 5 from that community. With the increased amount of construction and development we're going to have, that's a vested concern. What's it going to do when they start development of this project, how we're going to get out of the community and how we're going to get back in. The Community Center Road runs parallel to the south part of Trotter Lane. That is the concern of the property owners in that area. Is that going to be developed? Is there going to be traffic coming through that road? Is it going to be paved? And what's it going to do to the property owners as far as taxation is concerned? So there's a number of interests that are concerned in that letter that addresses these particular items. But I basically wanted to come and tell you before the board, this is a project that we feel is going to affect our community tremendously. And I wanted to make sure that everybody knew about the letter. And I see you have the letter that's been presented to you, and I thank you for taking into consideration of this letter. It addresses those items that we've all come collectively as a neighborhood and says these items should be addressed. Not only traffic, but we're also talking about the drainage. We don't know what's going to happen once they start the excavation and the development of that project. We don't know exactly what's going to happen after that. That's our concern, because after the fact, it's too late. There's nothing we can do after it's done because they'll be off and gone and we're stuck with the problem. Right now, Jackson Hamlet is an autonomous little community. Everything we do in that community is done by the property owners themselves. Lighting, we pay for trash, everything we do automatically on our own because we have to do that to exist. It also has a historical value to it. There's a lot of homeowners who live there, and they have been very productive in developing Pinehurst within itself. It has a lot of historical value to that community in itself. And we'll have a vested concern of the citizens who live there on what happens in and around the community. So I ask you again to take into consideration the contents of that letter before making a decision on what you want to do with this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tyson, and thank you for that letter. We all did receive it earlier today, and I know it was read.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Lynn Goldheimer.
Lynn Goldhammer, 11 Salem Lane in Pinehurst. There's so much to this, it's almost, who knows where to start. A couple things I was wondering about is the size of these buildings. How many bedrooms, baths, and square footage are they planning for these to be?
I believe that's in the, I thought I read something of a square footage range. Did I not read that?
We could let the applicant answer that if they'd like.
Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, let me introduce myself, and thanks for having us today. Rick Rosenbaum, Senior Project Manager with Red Pine Investments. The lot sizes themselves dictate the size of the home based on the setbacks. These homes will be two-story in size and would range from about 1,600 to 2,000 square feet.
Right,
I think 2,000 square feet is the maximum. That does not include the area in the garage.
Okay, thank you.
Bedrooms and baths likely to be 3 and 4 bedrooms, or 3 plus a den, likely.
Okay. Also, it said that this area is zoned both commercial and suburban. I was wondering how much is commercial and how much is suburban of those 8.6 or whatever acres?
No, yeah, I don't think so. It's all zone residential, actually.
Is it? Okay. Okay. The porch, you keep mentioning the porches, and I was kind of getting lost on that. Is there a limit to how deep it can or cannot be, the porches on these buildings?
There are. Go ahead, you guys know the precise numbers. Yeah.
I keep hearing encroach 7.5 feet. I don't know what the encroach means.
Go ahead.
Okay, so in the ordinance, there is a standard, and this is directly from the form-based guidelines. You can see the front porch here, and this is the build-to line. And the ordinance requires a minimum of 50% of the structure to be built to that build-to line. So it has to be built to that line. And that's in order to keep the streets, the buildings pushed to the street and to create that corridor of housing and the view and to create that community effect that you see in the images on the right-hand side.
So the porches will be 7.5 feet deep? Is that what you're saying?
They can go up to 7.5 feet deep, correct. And in general standard for front porches and porches like this, 7 feet is comfortable. Anything smaller than that is uncomfortable. It allows for a chair or something out there to be comfortable on a 7-foot porch. So
I think maybe the missing point, that build-to line is 15 feet from the front.
Correct.
So you can go from that line 7.5 feet out, which is halfway to the front of the property.
Correct. And the form-based guidelines actually allowed that to go to 2 feet. So we're backing up from that a little bit.
How much space will be between these houses?
There's the requirement is 6-foot side setback, so there'll be 12 feet in between homes.
12 feet total, 6 per house.
6 on each side, that's correct.
Okay. I have a bit of concern. Looking at the overview of these, it looks like a bunch of double wides. I'm sure you're not going to be doing that, but it just doesn't look that interesting. And when you show me these photos of these houses in Maple Lawn, look at how wide they are. They're not narrow houses. And maybe it's when the garage is attached that they look extra long.
Those are also 3-story. I mean, just to.
Yeah, but they're not aligned with what's really being proposed to be built there. And so it kind of gives a bit of a deception. If you look at the drawings too, they look so very beautiful, but there's curved streets and big trees and wider houses, and this is all being put in like a grid. It's not aligned with the drawings that they're associating with this project. So
I took those photos to be more reflective of showing us the porch rather
why
than.
don't you go back to the drawings
Well, in addition,
of
the form-based code contemplates multiple sizes of houses.
Yes.
The sizes that are being contemplated here is the cottage size, which is the smaller of the three designs.
A cottage size, but not so much a cottage design, really. Look at the drawings of these houses. We're right there, look at that. That's not what is being shown.
Actually, this is a model that is exactly what, the model was designed and developed exactly on the
Really?
lot sizes. Yes, that
So
is 12 feet.
how wide are those houses in those drawings, and how wide are the houses in the things we just saw, the overviews?
I would say they're very similar to the one with the side porch, I would guess. I don't have exact information, but I would guess it's very similar.
Doesn't really look it.
These are all homes they're wider than townhomes, so they're a minimum of, I think they're 22 feet wide.
22 feet wide, thank you.
Those houses are?
Yeah, and that's consistent with what's shown in the form-based guidelines.
That's
If
correct.
you want to go back to that slide that shows
And
the
it-
development standards.
Yeah, and Alex, well, yeah.
I don't know, it doesn't really look like the drawings. I also, just go back one. You see the side of the house there on the left? You see those windows? When those houses are 12 feet apart, are they going to have windows on the sides?
Yes.
Yes, they will.
Yes, they will.
So all too often, I'm seeing houses going in and there's no windows on the sides.
Yeah.
Or if they have them, they're not symmetrical and there's nothing attractive about it. So,
Well, I think they just said they will have windows.
Yes.
okay.
Good.
I just think there should be some set standards, especially when you're looking at upper 400s and 500s. Don't skimp out on the things that give it some character.
Okay.
I have a concern, really, especially when we had those urban planners come into our suburban town proposing 3 new downtown business districts. One of those was over by the post office. And at that time, I thought the development was going to just stay over there. And I have a concern that they're going to start putting this in, is developing it over next to Jackson. And my concern with that is developers will start to try and buy up Jackson Hamlet, and we would lose that community, and they would lose a nice, safe place to live. And I think everything should be done to protect that. And I guess this comes to mind because I remember years ago in a town I lived in New Jersey, my neighbors 2 doors down, someone came up to my friend's father and offered him $550,000 for his house. Just a simple cape, probably bought in the 60s. He grabbed the money and then realized you couldn't find a house in town for that much. He thought he was coming out ahead, and he wasn't. And they ended up, the surrounding towns you couldn't even buy into, they ended up having to move up to New York State because they just couldn't afford to be in the community they wanted to be in anymore because they let that go. And I worry about that happening.
The only thing, Ms.
Making offers to people who it may be more than what their home is worth, just so they can hurry up and get that. And you think that, oh, wow, $100,000 or $150,000 or whatever, that's a lot for this. But once you leave there, you can't find a house for under $400,000 in this area anymore.
I think we're trying to focus on the site plan that's being presented, so.
And so I will go back to that, but that's one of my major concerns, is that I think we need to be very careful about development in that area. My other concern is that looking at this, this is a very densely populated piece of property, and would you want that in your neighborhood?
Well, first of all, this is a vacant parcel right now.
I understand.
Okay? So it's not as if we're placing this proposed development in the middle of our neighborhood, so to speak.
Right.
It's in our village. It's a densely, it's a vacant piece of property. It's zoned for residential. So it
If
may
that was
certainly seem somewhat appropriate. We'll discuss that further as a council as we close this out.
If it was an empty piece of property across from your house, would you be excited to have it come in?
If it was zoned appropriate and conformed with our zoning standards, I would have no problem with it.
And I guess looking around Pinehurst, I wonder also, does it go with the character of Pinehurst? Because most of Pinehurst has larger lots and individual homes. They're not all cookie cutter in the same look and design. And I think...
Let's address that. Look, there's a variety of size of lots in Pinehurst. You can look at them as the closer you are to the village, the smaller the lots are. So if you move from the village, the lots get larger. That's how the community evolved. As a matter of fact, it's somewhat traditional of how many communities evolve.
And they're smaller homes on the smaller lots.
But that's our community. That's we're made up of a lot of different neighborhoods here in the village of Pinehurst. And but I think, speaking in general, the homeowners here very much conform to the consistency and ambiance and character of our overall community, though each neighborhood somehow maintains its own sort of identity.
Yeah. I just also want to mention that, and I come to these a lot, and I try to fight the development because I think a lot of it starts taking away from what you have. And at some point in time, you're going to look back and say, what did we do to this town, and why, and how are we better off for it? And I just want to say, I was driving up the eastern shore of Virginia a couple of years ago, and that area used to all be farmland and fishermen, and now it's getting developed like crazy. And I just want to say, I saw one town that wasn't being developed, and I said to the guy there, oh, they haven't found your town yet and developed it. And he said, no, they're not allowed to. We don't allow developers. If somebody wants to move to our town, they have to wait till a house is available. And I think, and because of that, they maintained the character of their town where it's being lost everywhere else.
Right.
Where we have now a homeless population we didn't have 10 years ago, but 10 years ago you could afford a nice home for under $200,000 here.
Right. Okay. Well, that's an interesting concept. Thank you, Ms. Goldhammer. I guess the only way I'll punctuate what you said is that change is inevitable, but growth can be managed and controlled by the elected representatives, the appointed advisory committees. That is what government's about, and that's what's happening tonight, and that's what's happened over the last 19 months or so, that this project has come along. So thank you. That ends anybody who signed up for a comment. Is there someone who hasn't signed up that would like to make a comment on this topic? No. Yes, sir. Please come forward and identify yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is William Pitts. You saw my townhouse in one of the pictures. I'm in Bretton Woods. I will be right across the street looking into, hey, Mr. Coates.
I'm sorry, I did not hear your name, sir.
William Pitts, P-I-T-T-S.
Thank you.
So you saw a picture of my townhouse there in one of the slides. I will be directly across from the water reservoir,
okay,
which might turn into a mosquito pond. I certainly applaud all the remarks made by the lady who preceded me. I only wish you were on the council for a voice of reason. You got close. We wanted to talk about the layout. You got close to the layout. It is very similar to a trailer park, a mobile home park, these small, narrow units which will be going in, with a space between each one, which was indicated would be, was it 12 feet? 6 feet?
Total of 12.
I heard 6.
No.
Feet setback each side.
On the side.
Yeah. 6 on each side.
And contradicting what you did say about the closeness, there's an inherent value there, and that is, should I need a cup of sugar, I can just lower my window, and the lady on the other side, or the man, can just hand me a cup of sugar. The units are so close. Mr. Koontz, one question for you. You indicated your office was in Pinehurst? Your office is in Pinehurst? Do you have 2 offices?
No, we moved from Southern Pines and we moved to Pinehurst recently.
Well, I visited you in Southern Pines, so you are now in.
We are now in Pinehurst.
Welcome to Pinehurst, Bob.
Thank you.
A new development. I must apologize to you, Mr. Koontz, because you must be extremely embarrassed because we heard the lavish praise given to Arbor Day and the true value of trees and growth and green. And here you are now ready to clear-cut 8 acres of trees in Pinehurst. So I'm sure the members of the council, especially the presenter of that, must feel somewhat embarrassed as the council now decides to allow the clear cutting of those trees. In your layout specifically, you have a green area, which you indicated that the children would play in. I would also point out that dogs will do their business in. You do not have a special space for dog walkers, and that's probably not a concern. A question on the layout, just 2 more items here. If you have guests, one of those units, especially the units facing that water pond, which I call the mosquito pond, do they enter the front door, or do all visitors come in through the back doors?
The goal would be for them to enter in the front door, and we've associated on-street parking and parking throughout the alleyways that is convenient and close to those individual units. So the goal would be to have people walk, unless they know them very well, walking in the back door and through the garage would not be appropriate. So the goal is to
There are
have them walk
parking
through.
places in the alleyways, is that true?
Yes, there are. You can see along this edge, there are parking spaces along this edge. There are parking spaces along the street on both sides. There are parking spaces in this location as well that are convenient to these units. These spaces are convenient to these units, and then the on-street parking on both sides are convenient to these units and these units.
Those units on Trotter Drive, those front porches then would face Trotter Drive, yes?
That's correct.
And in that alleyway, the front porches would face the runoff reservoir.
Yes, that's correct. So the goal is that that is not a reservoir, it is a dry pond, and the goal is to actually make it shallow enough that it can be a park space that can be utilized for dog walking and other things like that.
That the dogs may utilize. In regard to porches, my last item here, Mr. Koontz, with all respect, no one sits on front porches.
Sit on mine.
When's the last time you sat on your front porch?
2 days ago, and it was very nice outside.
Thank you, Mr. Pitts.
For your time.
You're welcome. All right. Dare I ask, is there anyone else who cares to? No? Oh, no. You've had your say. Yes, ma'am.
Density of the
Okay.
We are neighbors of Mr. Pitts, and
Ma'am, will you please introduce yourself? Your
my name is
please.
Patricia Yoakum. My husband Richard and I live in Bretton Woods, and we're in agreement with Mr. Pitts about the concern of the stormwater area, and extremely concerned about the density of the amount of units that are proposed to be built in that area. They all look so pretty on paper and what have you, and yet at the same time, there's no buffer anymore between our community and the community that's proposed. And as far as the amount of traffic and what have you, statistics are all well and good, but I think it's a smokescreen, because the traffic already is beyond mentioning even here. So I think it's a very big community. Yes, they're going to have wonderful, wonderful $400,000 and $500,000 homes that some people can afford, but I think that it will mess up the community, and it will mess up the amount of area that our community has grown to enjoy over the years. And we've been in the communities. Bretton Woods has been in a community for decades and decades, and has maintained its beauty. But I think this is going to interfere with that whole concept. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. I think we've finished hearing from the public at this moment. Doug, is there anything else? We'll keep the hearing open for this moment. Does anyone have any more questions for the applicants here?
I just wanted to take 2 minutes and make a couple final comments. We are in the business of providing new housing to communities. That's what we do. And this property is the final step, and this plan in front of you is the final step of a process that's been ongoing for several years. And the public may not appreciate the process that's been ongoing. There was time taken on the Pinehurst South area plan and the form-based guidelines to put together development standards for properties within the plan. This property is within that plan. We have worked for 2 years tirelessly to establish a plan that adheres to those guidelines. We've gone back and forth with Bob many, many times. We were in front of the planning board a couple of times. We worked with staff, and this is the plan that's in front of you, and we have a plan that conforms to those planning guidelines. We did not make those planning guidelines. The planning department and the town council and the planning board reviewed those guidelines and adopted a plan and said this is the blueprint for this area of our community. We are now in front of you with a property within that community. There will be other properties that we don't control that will come in front of you. We happen to be the first one. It's a little bit of a painful process because change is painful. But there has been ample time and energy that has been spent reviewing the guidelines, and this is the plan that you see in front of you, and the lot sizes that you see in front of you, and the home sizes, and the setbacks, and the build-to lines are all consistent with that document. We did not make up those guidelines. We are trying to live within those guidelines. So I don't think there's a great appreciation for all the work that has come before this plan that you see here tonight. We appreciate all of the public input. We appreciate all of the time that the staff, the town council, and the decision makers have spent giving feedback, reviewing our plan, and we look forward to hopefully a favorable outcome of the review of our site plan and our proposal in front of you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I ask for a motion, is there anybody else has a comment here?
So I'd just say procedurally, I don't see a need to continue the public hearing, so we could close the public hearing and move on to the next agenda item.
I would move to adjourn the public hearing and proceed to agenda item 8A, consider ordinance 25-06 Trotter Drive zoning map amendment.
Just a question, because of the way they're listed on here under 7A, do we need a motion first prior to closing the public hearing? That will be part of 8A, the motion itself. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion.
Second.
Second, motion second. All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Before we entertain a motion, a decision motion, I just want to review that this has, as a few people have mentioned, this has been quite a long journey. And I want to compliment the Planning and Zoning Board for their steadfastness through this effort. I happened to attend those several meetings, so I've learned firsthand of the process and the give and take that people went through. I find this this proposal, the applicant proposal, as of the moment, a very practical response to the feedback they have received from the Planning and Zoning Board and from the council in the past. And I think this process represents local government at its best. We get input, we listen, not everything ends where it begins. The applicant went from, I think it was 65 dwelling units to 48, if I remember the numbers. And as I said earlier, I think change is inevitable, but growth can be managed and controlled by a responsive government and a vigilant citizenry that provides its input to elected officials and to the advisory committees that guide us. So I welcome the continued discussion, and I'll consider a motion or the comments.
Before we start a motion, I just would like to comment that this hasn't just been a 2-year effort for you guys. This is more like about a 5-year effort on the part of the community, to tell you the truth. If we go all the way back to the development of the comprehensive plan in 2018-2019, which advocated development of a small area plan for this particular part of Pinehurst. And as a result of that, we went on the road to develop a small area plan which addressed Pinehurst South with considerable community input, to tell you the truth. And the result of that was that it led to the development of the form-based codes and the subsequent changes to the PDO. So it's been more of a 6-8 year process, to be honest with you, to get where we are. And this is, by the way, this is the first go-around with the use of our form-based codes. So the pioneers have received the arrows, as they say. So I'm sorry about that. And so we've learned a lot in the process, and I think we've learned a lot, and we'll probably be able to apply it in the future, maybe a little more expeditiously. But it's painful to go through the first go-around in this. But I do believe that this proposal has the potential to create a real residential community with a community feeling. And I think that was the intent of the small area plans and the form-based code, was to create neighborhoods. So this has the potential, in my opinion, to create a neighborhood that we'd all be very happy with, to tell you the truth. So,
Thank you. Jack, anybody else? John, Dr. Morgan?
Well, yeah, and Jack, I would just add on to that as a neighborhood, it may have a different feel from Bretton Woods or lots of other neighborhoods in Pinehurst. Certainly when we think about the so-called historic district in Pinehurst, there were structures built there that don't look like they're historic, that were built before there were historic guidelines. And so we don't have consistency throughout Pinehurst, but we try to plan things in a way that is logical. And I think, the concerns that I have around stormwater are not really what is at stake here. That's not the decision we're being asked to make at the moment, and that's something that we will trust staff and the existing engineering guidelines and so forth to take care of. So we'll just add that on.
Other comments? And if not, I think what we probably need to do is make sure we adopt the right motion. So,
Well, I'm willing to move on a motion here to approve as submitted. And I'll read that out as I move to approve ordinance 25-06, amending the official Pinehurst zoning map as it pertains to the rezoning of approximately 8.04 acres of land, 4 parcels, located in the vicinity of Trotter Drive, west of North Carolina Highway 5, consisting of Moore County parcel ID number 0005296, 0005296, 0005297, and 0005298, and find the proposal is consistent with the 2019 Comprehensive Plan and/or Village Place Small Area Plan and Form-Based Guidance Plan based on the...
May I
have a motion.
amend the motion or add to it?
Yes.
I would add that it is consistent based upon the following. That is, this zoning map amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan strategic opportunity number 8 to create open space within neighborhoods, and serves to implement the guiding principle number 3, which is places to live, by providing additional neighborhoods and housing, and is consistent with the small area plan for Pinehurst South and the associated form-based guidance plan. I would like to add that.
I concur with that. You have a motion and a second.
We have a second yet, but
Well, if he just amended that, I then second it.
He seconded the motion to, the amendment to the motion. Okay, so all those in favor of that amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we now have a motion, it's been amended. Anything else further on this before we conclude on adopting the motion, the whole motion, as amended?
Having a vote on the...
We haven't voted?
So I think you voted on the amendment. is what
Yes, we voted on the amendment.
So now you're voting on the actual motion.
Yes.
we're voting on the amendment. Oh, fine, thank you.
Okay, we voted on the amendment, it was adopted, Jack's amendment, and now we'll take up the motion as amended.
I move to approve the motion as amended.
Okay,
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, adopted. So be it. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, public, for your comments.
Easy peasy.
Okay. Sure. Why don't we take a 5-minute break? Well, let's come back at 7:40, is that 6:45 Eastern Standard Time. Welcome back. We will go down to item 9 right now, which is titled Resolutions. So we have 3 to consider, excuse me. First one, A, is to consider Resolution 2510, appointment of Mr. Bruce Geddes to the Neighborhood Advisory Committee for the Western ETJ. That's where he lives. This is significant from the standpoint of, I don't recall if we've ever had anyone from the ETJ appointed to our Neighborhood Advisory Committee. If someone has some historical knowledge, well, I'll have to turn to Jack. Jack, if you recall, no, okay, then it's.
Under the old format, there was one that sort of, but anyway,
Okay.
under our new format.
Okay, so that being the case, obviously we have a good relationship with our residents in the ETJ, and because from time to time that topic comes up, but we have a good relationship, and this will hopefully even add to that as having some input from the ETJ officially at the Neighborhood Advisory Committee. So, Doug, is there anything more you'd like to add, and then we can...
This was a position that we created last month for the NAC, and we interviewed Bruce Geddes in the past couple of weeks and found him to be a very knowledgeable person, and he also has a lot of connections in this area and has been politically or civically active in the past. So I think he would be a good asset for being on the NAC.
Okay. Is anybody, I see Mr. Geddes out there. How are you, Bruce? I don't know if we need you to come up here unless someone has a question for Bruce. No, I don't have any. John?
I would be ready to make a motion.
Okay, I didn't know if you had a question. Okay. All right.
I want to preempt anyone else, but
All right. Well, then, having that, we'll consider a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 25-10, appointing Mr. Bruce Geddes as the Neighborhood Advisory Committee representative for Western ETJ, effective March 25th, 2025, with said term to expire June 30th, 2027.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed. Congratulations, Mr. Geddes. Okay, and your fan club.
And I would also be happy to move to remove Resolution 25-09 from consideration during the March 25th, 2025 regular meeting.
Second.
Motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's adopted and removed. Now we go to Resolution 2511, a resolution opposing Senate Bill 382. Doug, you want to give a little bit of the background, and then we can go into the resolution?
Yeah, so there was a bill passed this December, Senate Bill 382. It was attached onto the overall bill for hurricane relief in western North Carolina. And this last-minute addition removed downzoning ability and authority from municipalities. So there has been a lot of discussion about this statewide with the league and other organizations that promote municipalities. And we've been in talk with them. There are other proposed bills out there to rescind this law that has gone into effect recently. So this is a potential letter of opposition to Senate Bill 382 and asking them to revoke it and to provide the local authority with that ability to downzone properties as municipalities see fit.
Okay. Let me just comment a moment here. A little bit of the history, a little more than what Doug just conveyed. This was a 132-page bill that primarily focused on aiding the people affected by Hurricane Helene. And so it was moving through the legislative process. At the last minute, someone in the legislature added page 131, which dealt with this whole idea of localities and their ability to, local governments to, that they have now to downzone, which they do on occasion. Municipalities do that throughout the state. There was no hearing, there was no discussion. We all read about it after the bill became enacted, basically. It passed, it was vetoed, and then the veto was overridden. And so there are a lot of good things in the bill, but this particular section was aimed at all municipalities. And it affects some municipalities more than others. Our neighbor, Southern Pines, is in the midst of updating their entire sort of PDO, UDO. They've been doing this for a year and a half now. And so there's a strong opposition to this. One of the unique things in this bill, which you very rarely see in bills, is that it was made retroactive by 180 days. So when it was enacted in law, it was effective going back 6 months. So that makes it very unique. And so this resolution, I think, serves as a good statement of the effect it has on us as the Village of Pinehurst, and why we urge them to rescind that one section, that one page in the 132-page bill. So having said that, I will...
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just a little background that today we learned from the North Carolina League of Municipalities Legislative Council that there is a compromise bill that they expect to come forward and hopefully will address some of the issues that came about because of this removal of down zoning authority for municipalities.
Who would we be sending this to?
Well, we would be sending it to our legislative delegation.
Okay.
And we certainly would provide it to the media. And it would also empower us to join a group letter for the, among all the municipalities that recommend, again, the rescission of this one section.
Has anyone talked to our representatives about this?
Yes, I've talked to...
And what was their response?
The response was that it's probably going to be corrected at some point.
How does this affect us?
So the most likely area that this will affect us is as we rewrite our PDO and update it, there will be certain areas, probably focus area 5 along 211, that we may or may want to change the zoning slightly, and if that was to be considered a down zoning, what we might want to do, that would prohibit us from doing that. So, right now, most of it's zoned office professional. If we wanted to change that to either residential or even office professional, but with slightly less uses, that would prohibit us from doing that.
So really, it's a very small effect.
Yeah.
We're talking about...
Hard to say. I mean, if we decide to change the definitions of things in the PDO to update them, depending upon how the definition comes out, they may consider that downzoning. Who knows?
Now, my sense was, well, downzoning was maybe the largest point, that there were other aspects about changing zoning at all which could be impacted. It simply wasn't clear. And I think there are 18 counties that have made specific requests to be exempted from this as opposed to rescinding the entire bill. But
that sounds about right, that there have been...
I think it's up to 26 counties right now, yeah.
There's a part of this, though, that just rubs me a little bit here, and that's the idea that you're talking about downzoning, and if someone owns a piece of property, they bought that with the zone that it had. And then to change that into to do the downzoning and have their approval on there seems like an appropriate thing from property rights.
Well, there's also, the bill also affects non-conforming use certificates, the issuance of them by communities. It handcuffs them more.
Okay. I go back to my other question. How does this affect Pinehurst? And right now, what I'm understanding, the current bill, well, it's not a bill anymore. It's law. The current law has a limited effect on us from what I'm seeing here. And I just don't know what benefit we have by putting this out and getting into this fight when there's really no benefit to us.
Well, I guess depending on the eyes of the beholder, how limited the impact is. It's the potential impact. They're changing the rules we've lived by for a long time. And whether it's the segment neighboring Pine Wild or it's what we don't know is in front of us that we may want to be making changes about. I think it's,
Okay,
that's I think the point behind it is that silence, I think silence about this, while many communities are speaking out, silence about it is not the best approach.
well, I don't like getting into fights that are not my fight,
Right.
okay? Because I think that's a faulty strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And it leads you down a path that can cause other problems. I don't see where it's affecting us a whole lot to get us involved in this. The other part of this is I'm seeing it from a property rights standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And I don't want to belabor this,
No,
but
it's
I
not
got to tell you
gonna-
that I don't think we should be getting into this because I don't think that that this is in the best interest of Pinehurst, okay? So I don't think this resolution should go forward.
Okay.
I'll leave that.
I would just like to add that, and I wish I had brought it with me, but I didn't. Coates Cannon has a very lengthy description of what is in that bill. And it is far more far-reaching than it might appear at the surface. For example, if I remember correctly, and if anybody else read this, it could even affect parking. For example, if a municipality decided to reduce the number of parking spaces within its area, that is reducing density and therefore could be affected by this bill.
Well, it's been a while since I read that Coates Cannon, but if you did, potentially, if you changed something, a requirement within the zoning, someone could look at that as a potential downzoning. So I don't think there are a lot of areas that we are going to be actively looking to downzone. But if there are,
One of my points.
we are limited.
Okay. I've said my piece.
Okay.
Move on.
Other comments?
Yeah, I would, my only, I don't have a problem with what is written here. My only question is whether we want to express support for the provisions of the bill which are for the purpose of aiding West.
Well, I think our language does say that we were very specific here about just that one section. We're not saying rescind the whole bill. Let's see, pull it up there, I think.
Fine. Withdraw the comment then.
We oppose section of the bill, which is found on page 131 of the bill, period.
Fine.
Yeah, we didn't want to get into the whole bill, which we have no objection to, just the one that was put in, the part of the bill that was inserted without a hearing, without any public comment, without any notice to the communities affected.
My recollection is similar to Barb's, that it is actually more far-reaching than just down zone, potentially, nobody knows. And I don't think we're picking a fight here. I think we're expressing an opinion.
Okay. Any other comments, or I'll entertain a motion? Barb?
I move to approve Resolution 25-11, opposing Senate Bill 382.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
Bill passes, resolution passes 4-1. Thank you. Now we go on to ordinance 10A, ordinance 25-05, amending this SMPO Special Revenue Fund budget. Dana, go right ahead.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. So this budget ordinance for the SMPO Special Revenue Fund is related to the village's role as the LPA, the lead planning agency for the SMPO. We keep the books, so to say. Their budget is within the village's budget. And so at the last governing board meeting of the SMPO, they approved an amendment to the SMPO's Unified Planning Work Program, which is essentially their budget for the year. And it was to increase it for the two additional grant funds that they received during FY25 and have available to them to spend the $1,600 for complete streets and $61,050 of state planning and research funds that were unspent from this past fiscal year that DOT is allowing the SMPO to spend in FY25. And so since they have these additional funds available, we just need to increase the SMPO Special Revenue Fund budget for the additional expenditures and the additional estimated revenues.
Okay.
Dana, the actual impact on the Pinehurst budget is only for our portion of the 20% match.
Of the 61,000, correct.
61,000, so 12,000, and then whatever our share of that is.
Yep, that is correct. Yeah, and that is accounted for within the village's general fund budget, our portion.
Okay. Any other questions for Dana on this one? Seems pretty straightforward. All right, it's the will of the council.
Could I ask one?
Go ahead.
One question. I've sat in on a couple of these meetings myself, and this relates to something John mentioned very early on in the meeting. It talks about a transportation plan, and we know that there's a STIP plan. What is the scope generally of the plan that SMPO is supposed to come up with? Is it the consultants that are going to be recommending that plan, and how does it relate to STIP?
Sure, I'll answer that. So there is a comprehensive transportation, which is very broad, and that is currently being started, and that will be on a county level. So we'll be working with the county and the RPO that represents the areas of the county that are not part of the MPO. That looks at projects overall, but it is not funded, and so all the projects on there are not restricted by funding that's currently available. We are also working as the MPO to develop an MTP, a Metropolitan Transportation Plan. That is projects that we want to see happen in the MPO area, but it is restricted by what is available. And so we can put projects on there, and we have to estimate how much they cost, and we have to prioritize those based on how much money we expect the MPO to receive. So those are the major projects. So from the MTP, there will be projects that we recommend to DOT to put onto the STIP. So that's how those all kind of relate to each other.
And Doug, I believe the SMPO is required to come up with the MTP by end of next calendar year.
That's correct.
Right.
And that's to maintain eligibility for federal funding and so forth and so on.
So is that what the consultants are helping us with?
Yep, so they are going to be doing the MTP. Okay. The CTP will be done in coordination with the MTP, but it'll be more on the NCDOT. We'll be doing most of the legwork on that.
And I think as it happens, that consultant is the same that is consulting with us, Kimley Horn, consulting with us on our PDO rewrite.
It is.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion on ordinance 25-05.
I move to approve ordinance 2505, amending ordinance 2411 regarding the SMPO Special Revenue Fund budget to increase expenditure appropriations and amend anticipated revenues.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it's adopted. Let's go on to 11A, the FY 2025 audit contract. I said, Dana, it's your show again. Go ahead.
Yes, so around this time of year, we bring to council the audit contract for the audit for FY 25 for the year that will be ending, that will be completed in the next fiscal year. This year, the proposed audit fee, just for sort of the base audit, including the audit of the PAL bill funding, is $51,545. It is about a $4,300 increase over the fee that we paid for that same portion of the audit last year. It is, the contract is written so there's a not to exceed amount, and we will be billed for the actual hours expended for the audit. And so last year, that was the same way that the contract was written, and they did come in about $2,000 under that not to exceed amount. So we would hope that with the team continuing to work more off-site and reduce those out-of-pocket expenses and things like that, that, again, it would come in under that not-to-exceed amount for the contract as a whole. With adding in the technology and administrative fees and the out-of-pocket expenses, the total contract amount, the not-to-exceed amount that we're asking you to approve is $55,125.
I have one question. You made a point in the memo twice to cite the Powell bill. Why is that?
So there's a state single audit requirement, similar to the federal single audit of grant funding. It's a compliance and internal control audit. The state has its own, the state of North Carolina has its own requirement. Many states do for state grant funding. The Powell bill is, we receive other grants, but they're much smaller dollar amounts to where we typically are not required to have a federal single audit or any other state grant funds audited as a major program. So Powell bill is required every year. Since it's about $700,000, it's by far the most significant that we report. So that's required every year. And then if there were to be another grant program that had enough expenditures that would require a single audit, the additional fee is usually probably between $4,000 and $5,000.
Okay, thanks. I wonder what that was. Any other questions for Dana?
Retaining auditors year after year is advantageous because of the memory, the familiarity they have, but do we ever look for an alternative bid periodically?
We have not, that I'm aware of in the past, done an RFP for auditing. I'm not, at some point they must have to engage the initial auditor at one point in time, but we have been with the same firm for many years. It has been merged with or been bought by other firms over the years as well, and that has happened in recent years. It was DHG who merged with Forvis, and then Forvis merged with Mazars, with another firm, and is now Forvis Mazars. I have reached out, and I have looked at other municipalities similar to our size, and to see what their audit contracts are for, since it has to go to council in every municipality in North Carolina, and what we're paying is comparable with other municipalities, so we could do it. There certainly would not be a harm necessarily, but I think it's expensive, but I think it's the going rate, and there are not as many firms, from what I'm hearing, that want to do local government audits.
And no implication in my question that they're not doing a good job, so.
Yeah, also from a controls perspective, the auditors that come here every year are different, and so.
Yes. Yeah.
It is someone.
The team
different
has
actually looking at
changed.
it. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? No? We can entertain a motion on this.
I move to approve the fiscal year 2025 audit contract with Forvis LLP not to exceed $55,125 for the financial statement audit, state single audit 1 program, and applicable fees and out-of-pocket expenses.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, there you go. Thank you, Dana.
Thank you.
Now we debrief on the Moore County Land Use Plan. I assume part of the debrief is right there. Jeremy, come on up.
While Jeremy comes up, he can explain this, but the steering committee had completed their work and have recommended their work product to the county commissioners to review and hopefully approve and adopt. I know a couple of our members have attended some of the meetings, and so this is just an opportunity for us to share our experiences, what we think, and what the village of Pinehurst role should be, if any, moving forward with the county's land use plan. And Jeremy was our representative because he was on the Planning and Zoning Board at the time. He has since termed out, but he is also on our Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, so he is still considered one of us.
Thank you for that.
On that introduction, Jeremy, we'll hand you the microphone. Go right ahead. We've read things in the paper, and we've heard from you a little in the past, so this will be very helpful, I think.
Sure. Mr. Mayor and Council, thanks for having me this evening. I'm lucky and appreciative that I'm considered one of us here in Pinehurst and not one of the opposition. So I think I'm privileged to that. You know, as Doug stated, the committee, from our input standpoint, is over. The county has accepted us in our 9-month-long process. And what you see before you tonight on the screen are the recommended goals and recommendations and actions that the county has derived from our input as a committee. So as you may imagine, with 30-plus brains in the room, 30-plus thoughts and backgrounds, they received a very wide range of input from all of us. So during the process, we were broken into various groups, groups of 5 to 6, whereas individually we each, as a group, wrote the plan. We reviewed the 2013 Moore County Land Use Plan. We reviewed all of the input and presentations that were given to us from all the county officials, and we each, as a group, kind of derived all of our input. We fed them forward to those in charge, who then considered each one of them, put them together into our goals, recommendations, and actions. And what you'll see here is 5 goals, which I've sent to you, various recommendations, various actions. These were presented back to us. We did discuss briefly in our very last meeting, and these have since been presented to the county commissioners as well as the county planning and zoning board. Going forward, these, of course, will go through their processes. They'll be presented. They will collect public input at each level, planning and zoning board, as well as the county commissioners. This is only a part of the plan. So if you review the 2013 plan, there is an area that talks about goals, recommendations, and actions. And it's a very interesting read when we think of today and how many of those maybe came to light. So this is this portion of the plan that's being recommended by the authors. The remaining part of the plan, which is a lot of the data, a lot of the input, and writing the book, per se, will take about another 2 months to write for them. And we should see a draft come out of that process June, is what I'm hearing. But from that standpoint, our committee is complete from giving the feedback. I'm happy in this debrief to answer any of those questions from my viewpoint as a committee member and give you any of that perception. So, thank you.
I'll just open it up a little because I've had some thoughts on this and I've read as much as I can about it. And I do think it's important for the village of Pinehurst because it eventually impacts us, to say the least. I thought it was a pretty darn good document. It wasn't too dissimilar to what was in the past. I particularly was fond of the artist's conception in the newspaper that showed this concept of a small town and with the center of the community with small lots around that center of the community, and as you moved away from the center of the community, the lots got larger. The homes probably got a little larger. Mm-hmm. And then you got to what they call the rural edge. And I interpreted that rural edge as sort of the ETJ line. And then when you got past that, you got to what was called the agricultural part or land, which to me struck me very much about how Pinehurst has evolved in 100 and some odd years, and how some of our neighbors have evolved also. They started with the core, and they built on it. They utilized their local zoning ordinances and ETJ, and they gradually filled out as communities. And what I see the recommendations as shaping is trying to encourage similar things to occur in certain other communities that have not yet evolved in that fashion, so that population increases can be more convenient for some of those communities that at the present may not have the infrastructure to handle what the Southern Pines or Pinehurst or Aberdeen have, and also make it a bit attractive for developers to want to undertake an effort in a community like that. That's going to take cooperation from the community, from the developers, a lot of good guidance from the county, so you get people at the table who want to do this. I see this as a bit of a defense against just continued sprawl, because one of their key components is they want to preserve and protect the agricultural and rural districts of the county. Now, we don't particularly, Pinehurst is not known for its agricultural district, but we are part of the county, and we should lend our support as we can. So those are my immediate reactions. I realize this will go to the commission and so forth, and there could be changes along the way, but I really applaud your participation. I tend to think some of this may be reflective of you as well as many of your colleagues, of course. And I think it bodes well as we get to something, a firmer decision by our county government. So that's my comments. I'll defer to others now.
If you think back to the beginning of this process, before the study commission was formed, the county commissioners did listening sessions at the 3 high schools. And none of us could go to the one at Union Pines because it was on the night of a council meeting, but I went to the one at Pinecrest and I went to the one at Northmore. And you heard loud and clear the desire of the people in the northern half of the county to retain that. One interesting statistic that I ran across was that 94% of the unincorporated land in Moore County is zoned in some form rural and agricultural. And they want to preserve that. They don't want lots of things that are being developed in other parts of the county, and that's fine. That's what they want. I thought the overall recommendations were consistent with that presentation. I thought the composition of the study committee was excellent. It had representatives from all of the major stakeholders. I did note, and this was in my remarks to the county commissioners, there were 4 specific sections, or 4 specific recommendations that depend critically on population growth or the assumptions that you make there. And interestingly, in the 6 weeks since the pilot published an op-ed that I wrote, the state demographer's already reduced his 2050 estimate by 4.2%. And if there happens somewhere between now and 2050 to have 3 more of those, you'd be down to 150,000 people, not 180,000. I was careful to say to the commissioners that those comments should not be construed as anti-growth, just that they should be pro-rational decision-making. And the last thing that specifically, and this is recommendation 3.9.1, recommends the establishment of the ongoing commission to study growth, both involving local and county officials. If you don't have something like that, I think you run the risk that each elected body puts the blinders on. They decide what's optimal for them, but when you sum it all up, it's not optimal for the county overall. So I thought that was a very good idea on their part. I hope that they carry through with that, and I hope obviously that Pinehurst will be a participant in that. I thought the study itself and the presentation by the 2 co-chairs of the committee that they made to the county commissioners last week was excellent, and this idea of trying to create small towns rather than tacking on new developments of however many homes, but creating centers where you will have a commercial center and then residences around that. I don't exactly know how they're going to do it, but I think it's an interesting idea and probably a good idea, as opposed to property rights people selling off 20 or 30 acres of their 200-acre farm and having X number of homes built on it, sort of, I don't want to say willy-nilly, but with less planning. So those would be my comments about the overall product. And it'll be interesting to see how the county commissioners put this through the meat grinder and come up with a document.
I would like to say that when I read through this, I found it very encouraging. A little bit contrary kind of to what I see going on, or perceive to be going on. And so I wonder how likely is it that this will be a guide for the future? And you mentioned earlier the 2013 plan and how much has changed because of that. So can you kind of speak to where you see this being the guide for the future?
Sure. You know, and I'm happy to dig a little further as well, because we're speaking mainly of two different aspects of here, which is the agricultural transition overlay portion, as well as the small town. And those are very, very important pieces of this plan. Those are very aspirational, of course, and I think they're meant to be. You know, I give a lot of credit to our leaders, you know, Robert Hayter and, you know, Larry Best. You know, they have an extensive background in land planning, and so whenever they heard our feedback and they took all of it together, they heard the pressure from, you know, the rural communities, which again is 94% of Moore County zoning. Extensive pressure. They took a look at a lot of the land that's either being inherited and being asked for a neighborhood that's 15 acres, 20 acres, and they said, how do we, if we are going to grow, we debated the level quite extensively. There's a lot of feelings, of course, but if we're going to have a plan for growth, how can it be directed? And those, this was how they derived with that. This is not a zoning document by no means. This is meant to be aspirational. It's meant to provide a vision. And I think, you know, we speak a little bit about 382. I think that is a little bit of a roadblock to our visions when we want to govern ourselves and we want to direct our growth a little bit. So I think they're watching that. However, what they're looking to do here is to take a look at the, 7 different unincorporated areas, create the small town overlay to those, which again triggers to the developers, hey, if you want to achieve something, you can do it here, helps direct any growth that the county sees in a managed way. So a lot of kudos to those guys. They're very smart at what they do. They heard all of us talk about all of the concerns and pressures, and they formulated those 2 aspects of this plan, which I think we'll see how it goes through the Planning and Zoning Board process as well as the county commissioners, and see if there's any of these actions that come to place to make it actionable, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Dr. Warren? No. Jack?
No, I think you summarized pretty well, Jeremy. I read the 2013 plan also, and actually a while ago, but these recommendations appear to a great extent in that plan too. I mean, it's hard to implement all those. I mean, they've got 5 goals, 26 recommendations, and 91 action plans, so not unlike our comprehensive plan, which has over 100 action items. So it's interesting. But I was struck by a couple things. One is that overlay district to create these small towns in those 7 areas. That'll be interesting to see how they pull that off. It'll take a lot of political will and some discipline to actually do that. I was most interested in some of the recommendations that they're more directly I have interest in. In their 110, it talks about expanding and enforcing the highway corridor overlay districts. I thought that was interesting, and hopefully we can provide maybe some input in that respect. Who knows? But I thought that action plan was useful in the sense that we are considering that also. And then they talked about, in one of the action plans was implement zoning policies about conservation subdivisions. And we just barely touched on conservation subdivisions in our comprehensive plan. So that's it'd be interesting to see if we can. There's some lead that we can follow there. But overall, I thought it had a lot of interesting material. I was struck by what it didn't contain, because I was fully expecting some type of aggressive discussion about maybe the municipalities ought to back off from their eagerness to maintain control in the ETJs. That it didn't really address that at all. And I thought, in fact, the presentations were very complimentary, I thought, to the established towns, Southern Pines, Pinehurst, you name it, all of them. And so I thought that was encouraging, to tell you the truth, that they recognize that we have been very much the source of growth and continue to be important to the county. So I thought that was very encouraging. So we'll see how it plays out. Once again, it's a land use plan. It's a comprehensive plan. It's aspirational, as you pointed out, to a great extent. And we'll see how the rubber meets the road in the future.
So you're looking closer to the end of the year for some sort of final product?
Yes, sir. My eyes are certainly glued to that as being part of that process, and I'm very interested. So I think we will, the last time I have heard from the authors, June, I think we'll see the actual plan and how it was, or how it's going to drive to more of a book, into more of the vision. But these are the recommendations. They're a very important part of it.
Two-part question. One, is there a planned meeting or briefing or discussion between municipal leaders and the county commission? One, and or two, is there something we as a council can do or say to either encourage or be helpful in this? So your thoughts?
Yeah. So, to John's point earlier in the council meeting as well, talking about working with municipalities, taking a look at, everybody's zoning process. One of the early on overtones that was not only coming from the authors, but the committee to them was collaboration with municipalities. And because again, we're 108,000 people today. There's many municipalities that are larger than that themselves, and we all work together. Many duplication of resources. We are, in my argument, one big small town. So we have to grow. If we're going to grow together in a lot of senses. That was a very big message to the authors as well as them to us. And so you've spotted some of those recommendations. So I think they're interested, the county is, and anything that we can do. I did support or send plenty of message that I could that in hopes that the county would reach out to the municipalities, but I think it's going to take a mutual effort. If that helps.
Well, give some thought to anything we might formally do. We don't need to decide now, but we want to be helpful, and we have a stake in the future of Moore County, and we're just one little part of it down here, but this is going to be a cooperative effort if it's going to be successful to help preserve the history of Moore County as well as to be prepared for the change that's going to occur.
Yep. And I don't want to take over, but I think part of the plan tonight, or part of, was also the presentation that may have been given. Shannon, do you mind pulling that up? Because two big pieces I think that we pointed out, just for those who did not attend, is the agricultural transition overlay, and what does that mean, as well as a small town? So where the growth could be directed, and what does that mean for us here in Pinehurst? And so I think, Shannon, if you don't mind going down to, much of this I've made some points in the past, but here we can read the model for the small town is to create real places to accommodate growth, protect against the sprawl in the county, as mentioned, protect existing towns' historic form, use of historic town form to create connected communities, transition from town to rural by providing defined edge, to your point, create a variety of housing types, provide access to green spaces to enhance quality of day-to-day life, and you'll see that in the recommendation. But this is a 1 square mile of downtown Southern Pines. And Shannon, if you don't mind just kind of moving up a few slides, down, I apologize. So as you see here, the points are that where the rural lands, where do they almost in a sense blend in, but you still would create a rural edge. And that edge could come in many forms, of course. But Shannon, I think what I was looking for, I'm sorry, do you mind scrolling down a little bit further. These are just aspirational pictures. We can take a look above there a little bit. One more step above. All right, so this is actually some of that talk of the edges, and you can see where a town center would be. It would be the 1 square mile, and then the blue, it'd be a 3 square mile, where the 1 square mile would accept larger density, and then the blue square mile then would be a lot larger lots, creating that edge into the rural impacted areas. And as you see, once you get out of the more dense areas, you would go into more curvature, streets into that effect. And you mind going down to where it shows the towns? A little further. This is a big, and we can stop anywhere on this if you wish, but I wanted to point out something to those who weren't up there. Come on down a little further to where it says Eagle Springs, Eastwood. Yeah, keep on coming a little bit. Sorry. All right, perfect, right here. So these are the identified areas to where the small town concept could be implemented. Again, this has to go through their process, but Eagle Springs, Seven Lakes, West End, Eastwood, Union Pines, Lobelia, Glendon, and I believe there's one more that's kind of off the screen. But these are unincorporated areas to where this type of planning could be implemented to drive, any sort of growth that the county may have, and whether they become incorporated one day, whether or not they would still have the look and the feel of a small town. So the density of these areas could be planned for roughly 7,000 per square mile. So that's a lot larger density than the 1,000 that we are on average. So, but planned appropriately, that was the point of the author. So I wanted to make sure we pointed out that. And do you mind scrolling down a little bit further to where it's going to have the green? Keep on going, keep on. It's almost the last slide, honestly. Yeah, right here. So when we talk about the agricultural transition overlay, this is where the area would expand. The more dense areas, the more urban areas of Moore County could expand. And if you take a look at the bright green area just north of the maroon and then the bright green area on the south of the gray, those are two proposed agricultural transition overlays. They carry different definitions where they're going to be edged by either a municipality or a municipality's ETJ. So they will not be driven off on an island into themselves, into the rural area. So similar situation to where these would accept a similar density upon the zoning, and these are areas within 10 and 20 years, water and sewer could be planned by the county to drive into, and that's the key. So instead of accepting larger developments off as property gets sold wherever in the county, infrastructure could be planned for these communities within that 10 and 20 year time frame, and then thus the owners of that area and the current property owners would understand that they're in that area. So I wanted to make sure that those two things were pointed out tonight for any of those who didn't attend.
Helpful. In those 7 towns, were they selected randomly, or there was some common feature that went into all of them?
Well, I think,
Yeah, this one right here, yeah.
They were selected by our leaders, however, and they can speak better to that. But just hearing from them, in my perspective, they already carry some characteristics of many town features. When we think of Seven Lakes, many of us think of it as a town today, but it's unincorporated.
Right.
It's part of the county. So they have streets, they have neighborhoods, they have, they have commercial, they have residential, as well as West End is growing, and in West End, and Union Pines, of course, is growing heavily.
Okay.
I think this was also in line with some thoughts they had prior to the creation of the commission, that tier from roughly Vass out to Seven Lakes, and maybe even beyond Eagle Springs, that just to our north, that was the most likely area for development, because in part it finesses the issue of the agricultural interests in the northern half of the county that don't want to see more development there.
Yes, sir, certainly.
If you
The one
don't make
thing
an
I
omelet,
thought,
you got to
one
break
thing I
some
thought
eggs
was
there.
missing a little bit was the employment centers. It's nice to want towns to be in these places, but where are people going to work?
Yeah, and in one of the maps before this, we're happy to go back, it does incorporate some of that area to whether it's an industrial area, industrialized area, whether it's, you know, some retail, it does incorporate that at least from a thought standpoint in the plan.
I don't have any other comments or questions. Anybody else?
Yeah, I want to thank Jeremy for not only tonight, but serving as our representative. So it was a lot of time, and we appreciate that.
And he's one of us, too. That's the best.
That's right.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Jeremy. All right. Other business before we sort of, and I'm prepared unless someone would like to stop, if we go right into the work session. Any other business at the moment?
I move to adjourn the regular meeting.
Okay. Motion? Second. Second, we've adjourned the regular meeting. Are we